Little Hu Fei, by nature, loved literature and yearned for martial arts, but unfortunately, he was born into the province's foremost swordsmanship clan. Above his 4 grandfathers were his 5 elder sisters, and unlike his father, known for being a child who loved books and scrolls, they forced him to train daily with the other disciples of the sect. However, little Hu Fei possessed an innate charisma and from birth was hailed as a gifted prodigy of the sword sect. The clan leader was already full of self-reproach, lamenting that if he didn't have only this one son, even if Hu Fei had only mediocre talent, he would never have forced him. Just then, the 2 brothers suddenly heard a series of terrified screams not far away. They ran to the scene to investigate. The 2 children encountered another swarm of bees. Terrified, they were about to run, when Hu Hantian was suddenly startled. He saw that 6-year-old Hu Fei, facing the swarm of bees, remained remarkably calm, and immediately pulled his younger brother back, telling him to wait. He saw Hu Fei manipulate his internal energy far beyond the ability of ordinary people, causing his sword to move according to his will, swiftly slicing the swarm of bees in 2. The 2 were rooted to the spot in astonishment. Such a small body, yet his swordsmanship is as elegant as a painting. Could this be true swordsmanship talent? Hu Hantian thought so, but he still couldn't hide his inner shock. After little Hu Fei finished slaying the entire swarm of bees, he finally felt a wave of exhaustion. 1 year later, Hu Fei grinned as he looked at what was before him, unable to help but exclaim about his good luck today. He had only sneaked off to the back mountain, yet in this desolate and remote place, he happened to encounter an old man who looked like a learned scholar. And the old man was engrossed in the book in his hands. Little Hu Fei, brimming with curiosity, cautiously approached and asked, "Old sir, what book are you reading?" The old man, not at all surprised by Hu Fei's approach, as if he had been expecting him, gently replied, "This book is called Hang Long Yu Hui." Upon hearing the title, Hu Fei fell into deep thought. Does it mean even dragons in high positions have regrets? The more Hu Fei pondered, the more intrigued he became. The old man didn't seem unapproachable, so he immediately asked if he could borrow the book to look it over. Seeing the manuscript, Hu Fei's eyes lit up, and he became almost entranced, reading each word. Seeing young Hu Fei like this, the old man suddenly had a feeling that his presence here was perhaps destiny. Thinking this, he kindly said to Hu Fei that if he truly liked it, he could take the book home to study, and return it when he had mastered its contents. Hearing this, Hu Fei was overjoyed. Feeling the old gentleman's trust, he bowed solemnly to the old man, took the precious book, and turned to leave. The old man watched Hu Fei's return. By the time he returned home, it was already dark. He had intended to explain about the strange gentleman he met that day, but he had skipped his training for too long. And as expected, his father scolded him severely. Hu Fei hung his head and took his punishment. It seemed he shouldn't skip training again for a while. The next day, Hu Fei obediently went to the training grounds, practicing basic kung fu with his senior brothers, from the 5 elements fist to the horse stance. Hu Fei was flushed, drenched in sweat. The instructor up front kept emphasizing the importance of basic kung fu. But Hu Fei's mind was elsewhere, completely lost in thoughts of that strange book. But at this time, he didn't yet know how much this damned book would change his life. Young Hu Fei was naturally gifted for martial arts, but he had no interest in training. In his eyes, sparring was boring, and no matter how good the kung fu, it was just fighting. But his father placed the hopes of becoming the province's best swordsman on him, forcing him to embark on the path of martial arts from a young age. Making him train alongside his senior brothers was truly difficult. Everyone else trained until they were drenched in sweat, while he didn't even break a sweat. He looked like he was trying his best, but in reality, he just wanted to work up a bit of a sweat to feel comfortable, thinking he was training just to avoid his old man's scolding. But he had stayed up too late reading last night, and during the horse stance practice, he was struggling to stay awake. His master was scolding the group for their weak lower stances. And seeing Hu Fei dozing off, he immediately flew into a rage, walked up and slapped him on the back, reminding him to straighten his back. But Hu Fei was truly too sleepy. He just reluctantly opened his eyes, yawned, and then back to sleep. In his dream, he was immensely satisfied to be communicating with people from the past, transcending space and time. For him, there was nothing more blissful. But in the midst of his deep sleep, a large hand slapped him hard on the back of his neck, jolting him awake, making him forget his dream. He looked up in alarm to find his father standing before him. His father scolded him, "You little rascal, you can even fall asleep while doing a horse stance. If I see you being this lazy again, you won't be sleeping in your room tonight. You'll be doing a horse stance in the training grounds all night." His master didn't find this particularly unusual. After all, Hu Fei had been different from ordinary people since he was young. But Hu Hantian, upon hearing this, was dumbfounded. After his elder brother left, he wore an incredulous expression, immediately chased after him and called him back. In his eyes, Children cultivating with their eyes closed wasn't rare, so why did he think Hu Fei was sleeping? Hu Hantian lowered his head and thought for a moment and slowly said, "Just now, when I hit him," the surprised look on his face, along with his indifferent attitude afterwards, and most importantly, he was even drooling. What else could he be doing besides sleeping? Hearing this, the master was stunned, unable to believe that this kind of arduous training was so easy for Hu Fei. But right after, he laughed loudly. "Brother, oh brother, he actually was sleeping." But little Hu Fei was also practicing the horse stance. Moreover, his posture is much more stable than those other kids. Hearing this, Hu Hantian wasn't happy at all. As a father, he was more concerned with whether Hu Fei was putting in the effort. None of them knew what was about to happen that night. Young Hu Fei, wanting to decipher the flying dragon's repentance he'd borrowed from the old master, brought all the books on runes from the library back to his room, carefully copying every chapter and verse of the mysterious book, afraid of missing any details. Suddenly, a knock came from outside. It was a maid from the residence looking for him, saying there was a letter that required the young master to open personally. Hu Fei was a little surprised to receive the letter, and upon opening it, found it was a handwritten letter from the old master. On one hand, I encouraged him to study it carefully, and on the other, I also sent him some of my own annotations. This made Hu Fei extremely happy, and he even praised the great author while lying in bed. At this time, perhaps because he had overexerted his mind, he was very tired, and Hu Fei quickly fell asleep. But at this moment, a white object gradually appeared above his head. Suddenly, as if jolted by something, he opened his eyes wide, and the white object, following the light emitted from his eyes, transformed into a small dragon. The dragon circled around each book in his room, finally glancing at Hu Fei, as if slightly displeased that its master was a mere boy, showing a look of disdain. But reluctantly, it burrowed into his head. The room fell silent again. Little Hu Fei seemed unaware of what had just happened, and he drifted back to sleep. Only this time, in his dream, the images that appeared before him were wondrous. A shimmering, mystical green light within the deep cave seemed to beckon him, urging him forward. One morning, Hu Fei whined and insisted that Uncle Tang personally supervise his training. Uncle Tang, Tang de Shi, a master of the Shi clan, knew of Hu Fei's talent but was also aware of his laziness, which greatly annoyed him. Adding to little Hu Fei's wheedling and cajoling, he finally agreed to let him practice for another half an hour before resting. These words made Xiao Hu Fei rejoice inwardly. On previous days, under the strict supervision of his uncle or father, he wouldn't be let off until the sun had set. His joy was short-lived, however, as he remembered last night's dream, and his heart suddenly sank. Just what was that place he dreamt of? The boy occasionally frowned and thought. He mistakenly believed it was another communion with a sage. It was just that the strange dreams of recent days kept lingering in his mind, like a blessed paradise, yet incredibly real, making him even more perplexed. He clearly remembered the lamps in his dreams, like soul lamps, illuminating the pitch-black depths of the cave. But there were many strange forks in the cave, and no matter which path he chose, he would return to the starting point. Like a dragon returning to its lair, it seemed any choice he made would lead him back to where he began. But the little boy persisted, trying every turn. The only path that seemed to require no choice was to turn back. But as he was lost in thought, searching for an answer, a fist landed on his forehead. He cried out in pain and turned around, to see his father standing there. He immediately put on a childishly petulant expression. At this moment, Hu Hantian looked at him sternly with anger. Before the boy could speak, Uncle Tang hurriedly bowed to his master. But then, his father began to scold little Hu Fei, and blamed Uncle Tang for not supervising him properly. Because every time he practiced, he would get distracted or give up halfway. He was assigned to Uncle Tang, who had sharp eyes. Hearing this, little Hu Fei felt a little wronged. But he didn't know that the reason his father was so strict and harsh was because he was extremely worried about his current situation. In his eyes, he didn't know if a mortal destiny truly existed, but he knew his son was born with extremely high aptitude. For little Hu Fei, if he used it for cultivation, his future would be limitless. But now, he was using it to be lazy and anger his elders. He feared this heaven-sent talent would become a misfortune for him later. After much deliberation and finding no other way, Hu Hantian punished him by confining him to his room for 3 days. 3 days. You are not to step outside this door for 3 days. But to the boy, these words felt like a great liberation. Watching his father's retreating figure, he thought, if only it were 5 days. In just 3 days, I wonder if I can fully grasp the first level of the repenting dragon technique. He didn't even spare a thought for Uncle Tang, who had been unjustly punished because of him, and quietly left. Watching little Hu Fei's back, Tang Dishi's heart was filled with mixed emotions, and he could only sigh. 2 nights later, little Hu Fei unexpectedly broke through to the first level. He was so excited he could barely open his eyes, but then suddenly realized. My back and knees ache, and my head is spinning. Just like that, I collapsed and fell asleep. I felt much more exhausted than after my usual training. Lying in bed, I wondered if I could enter that miraculous dream again. Gradually, my consciousness returned to that paradise-like place. Before me were countless forks and choices. But these paths were deeply etched in Xiao Hufei's mind. He knew they were all dead ends, so he slumped down onto the stone lamp. While he was at a loss, he heard strange sounds coming from the path he had arrived from. It seemed like they were talking about something like hidden dragon. Xiao Hufei pricked up his ears but couldn't hear clearly. I followed the sound, and the path I had just taken now became a deep, gaping abyss, descending into the earth. Just as I was feeling bewildered, my feet suddenly stepped into nothingness, and I plummeted downwards. He was the #1 expert of the Tang branch of the Hu family, with ghostly movements, appearing and disappearing like a phantom, making him difficult to defend against. Even most of the elders were no match for him, but in young Hufei's eyes, those elusive movements seemed to be in slow motion. Every movement, every exertion of force was deeply etched into his mind. Even he himself found it incredibly strange. The next morning, young Hufei woke up, making quite a bit of noise, which startled his maid, Xiao Jing, who rushed over, frantically asking the young master what had happened. Hufei said he'd just had a dream, which put her at ease. But remembering what had just happened, young Hufei had no mind to wash up, and hurried to the family library. In my dream, I originally intended to follow that sound and investigate below, but I ended up falling into a pitch-black body of water. The feeling of drowning was incredibly real and intense. Fortunately, I woke up with a start at that moment. Although I hadn't yet hit bottom, it reminded me of the warning in the book. If it's because I saw the path that I got lost, is it possible that the real path lies where I can't see it? Thinking of this, I tried again to see if I could enter the dream. And when he woke up, he was indeed back to square one. And continuing on, there was another cave he had never set foot in. Only, he was so excited that he woke up again. But this also sparked a lot of thoughts in his mind. He gathered the scriptures he had never read before. Moreover, apart from idling, he knew nothing else. But strangely enough, after comprehending the descending dragon's regret, these once unfamiliar writings suddenly became strangely easy to understand. He didn't yet know he was the reincarnation of a great power, and now he had become the true dragon's ancestral master. These things, inherently close to the origin of the great Tao, were naturally understood at a touch. But in his eyes, he thought he was exceptionally intelligent, about to become a great scholar respected by all. But seeing the young disciple painstakingly training, Taitan's face was full of disdain. He didn't care the slightest whether the Hu family became the #1 sword school in the province or not. But since it was the family head's request and his elder brother's favor, he reluctantly agreed. He'd heard Hufei was remarkably gifted with extraordinary swordsmanship, but now he seemed ordinary. Feeling he was wasting his time with this kid, Taitan told him to solidify his fundamentals, while he practiced his own swordsmanship nearby. However, he forgot his mace sword was incredibly powerful. Though incredibly small, why can I see his movements so clearly? It's as if this swordsmanship is already deeply engraved in my mind. Unknowingly, little Hufei has inherited the true dragon's legacy, believing himself to be naturally gifted and destined to become a great scholar. But he suddenly discovers that he can not only see through others' swordsmanship, but also grasp the essence of their martial arts. Faced with this sudden change, he feels like he's dreaming. But then he realizes that his body also seems to be stronger than before. Swinging my hand, moving my joints feels completely different. Suddenly throwing a few punches, I can even hear the whooshing sound. I've discovered my whole body is full of strength. Jumping lightly, I can actually jump higher than my own head, making me feel like I can fly. I'm overjoyed. But suddenly, I freeze. Something seems wrong. Don't I hate practicing martial arts the most? If I keep developing like this, won't my ideal become further and further away? Thinking of this, I feel a splitting headache. Holding my head, I cry out, "No way!" This cry startles Su Tai Ching, who is cultivating nearby. He anxiously asked if the boy was experiencing a cramp. Hearing this, Hufei realized he almost gave himself away, and quickly wiped his sweat, saying he was just tired and needed a rest. But this only angered Tai Ching. Tired after just 1 hour of practice? Who would believe you're the young master of the Hu family? He turned away, ignoring the foolish boy. Watching his second brother walk away, Hufei breathed a sigh of relief, and slumped to the ground, muttering to himself, wondering what was wrong with him. If his father were here, he would probably be furious. Half an hour later, in the back courtyard of the Hu family residence, Hufei still couldn't understand what was happening to him. Hu Junting was slightly stunned, wondering who had told the boy such nonsense. But immediately after, she said, probably the 9th stage. As long as you are above the 3rd stage, you will gradually grasp this ability. Upon hearing this, the not yet 8-year-old Hu Fei cried out in shock, "Heavens! I haven't even started cultivating yet, how can I possibly reach the 9th stage? If father finds out, he'll definitely force me to train until I die." Seeing her younger brother's silence, June Ding didn't think much of it, and casually asked, "You're also of age to cultivate soul power, why are you asking about this?" But as soon as the words left her mouth, she seemed to remember something. "Isn't it said that you have extraordinary talent, a rare swordsmanship? Could it be that you've already grasped this ability?" Hu Fei was even more frightened that his older sister saw through him with just one question. But how did she know? The ability Hu Fei received from the true dragon wasn't just simply seeing through swordsmanship. Initially, she was only teasing him, but seeing Hu Fei not deny it, June Ding suddenly had a bad feeling. Her younger brother clearly hated practicing martial arts and cultivation, an ability that requires day and night training and long-term accumulation to achieve. But the sword chi surrounding her blade is even stronger than second brother Tai Ching's, and her movements seem even more unpredictable. She's clearly this powerful, so why does eldest sister always appear so ordinary and unassuming? At this moment, she stopped and asked, "Little brother, did you see clearly? She is the eldest daughter of the head of the province's top swordsmanship school, and also the eldest sister whom little Hu Fei trusts the most." Ever since Hu Fei started reading The Flying Dragon in the Sky, strange things have been happening to him one after another. First, the recurring dreams. After that, my swordsmanship became naturally fluent. And now my body is suddenly stronger than before. Not only can I see through others' moves, I can even comprehend them and find their weaknesses. And all of this, in Hu Fei's eyes, is becoming increasingly strange. He can sense the essence of the swordsmanship that eldest sister just displayed. Its realm is probably not inferior to father's. But what surprised him even more is that he could actually see through it. As soon as June Ting stopped moving, she clearly noticed his surprised expression. She thought that perhaps Hu Fei hadn't understood, and asked, "How many times did you see my sword intent just now?" But when she heard his answer, June Ding finally lost her composure. With her soul power about to enter the 9th stage, the 3rd and 7th time, her sword intent was indeed unconcealed, but the subsequent times, she deliberately hid her sword intent, yet her little brother saw through it every time. Only then did she realize that his so-called clear understanding of her moves was likely more than just instinct honed by arduous training. But Hu Fei seemed oblivious, only noticing his elder sister's gaze becoming increasingly dazed. June Ding, for a moment, didn't know how to express her current feelings. So she grabbed her little brother's shoulders and showered him with praise, making Hu Fei even more confused. But a moment later, as if she suddenly remembered something, she said, "Little brother, remember, whether you want to walk the path of martial arts or not, you are the only son of the Hu family, the only one from the benevolent sword sect. Never forget this." Having said that, June Ting watched Hu Fei leave her courtyard with a smile. At this moment, 2 people entered from the side entrance of the courtyard. They were slightly surprised to see Hu Fei. "Little brother, why are you at eldest sister's courtyard?" But Hu Fei didn't notice that his 2nd and 4th elder sisters had arrived. He was thinking to himself, "It seems I can't read The Flying Dragon, boundless regret for now. Recently, all these things started after reading that book. I at least have to ask old master to clarify things." And as the 2 sisters approached eldest sister, 4th sister suddenly asked, "Little brother, are you here with eldest sister to avoid your cultivation?" After all, everyone knows Hu Fei isn't keen on cultivating. He's still basically fumbling around in the dark. Hearing this, eldest sister didn't explain, but seriously reminded her 2 younger sisters, "Although we are all little brother's older sisters, he is the young master of the kind sword sect. You must know, whether Hu Fei wants to or not, sooner or later he will grow into a true dragon. Therefore, such talk is inappropriate here." Father wouldn't want to hear these things either. Only then did the 2 react, realizing they had indeed followed the crowd a bit too much. A month later, Hu Fei was suddenly summoned to the small manor by the clan leader. The clan leader, a gentle old man, chuckled, "Do you know what day it is next month?" Hu Han Tian was first taken aback, then remembered it was his father-in-law's 70th birthday. Hearing this, the boy became excited. Lately, he hadn't been allowed to study chess manuals and had been forced to rest, driving him nearly mad. Going to his maternal grandfather's house meant at least 2 months without training, and he was practically drooling at the thought. Seeing his son like this, Hu Han Tian really wanted to give him a good thrashing, but considering his wife was present, he could only sigh. 3 days later, they were on a passenger boat headed to his wife's family home. The boy was enjoying the languid passage of time, relishing his carefree days. But this startled the girl. She glared at him, demanding to know who he was. But before she could say anything else, she started retching again. Seeing her like this, young Hu Fei kindly advised her not to hold back, as it would only make her feel worse. But the girl didn't listen. Sweating profusely, she said, "I'm fine, who are you?" Just as I finished speaking, I turned my head towards the side of the boat and vomited again. Seeing her like this, young Hufei truly felt sorry for her inside. He then used his fingers to press on several acupuncture points on her back. The young woman cried out in pain. But she suddenly realized that her whole body felt much more comfortable. She then understood that he seemed to have no malicious intent. Young Hufei then said to the young woman, "You're a cultivator too, aren't you? Try taking a deep breath, exhale it in 3 parts, then inhale 8 parts, circulate your chi once, and you'll probably be fine." The young woman was stunned at first, but it sounded like it might actually work. So, I closed my eyes and began circulating my chi. Finally, I exhaled a turbid breath, and my complexion gradually returned to its rosy hue. Watching Lu Mai's retreating figure, young Hufei felt amused. Did he really expect her to repay him? But at this moment, an elderly voice sounded above him. Looking up, he saw an old man smiling at him. "Could you tell me the name of the cultivation technique you used, young man?" "The technique you just used to cure my granddaughter, Lu Mai, of her seasickness." Little Hufei hadn't reacted yet, staring at the old man. He sensed immense danger. Under the influence of the reincarnation divine pupil, he could tell that the other man's power was at least several realms above his father's. The old man saw the boy staring blankly at him, but paid no mind and moved slightly. His figure descended like a celestial being, landing as gently as water flowing on a lake, his robes fluttering. But in little Hufei's eyes, this was even more terrifying. He saw clearly that the old man was descending step by step on air. He suddenly understood who the other man was, and sensing no malice, he said softly, "It's just a cultivation method I figured out on my own." But hearing this answer, the old man didn't believe it in his heart. Even he himself, having taken his granddaughter on the waterways for years, still hadn't found an effective method after all this time. How could a young lad who looked about the same age as his granddaughter possibly figure it out on his own? Unless thinking of this, the old man suddenly suggested taking his pulse. These words startled the young man, and after confirming the other party truly had no ulterior motives, he hesitantly nodded. He somewhat shyly offered his hand. The old man slowly placed 2 fingers on his wrist, sending a surge of internal energy into his meridians, circulating it for a full cycle. But after the examination, the old man's expression became extremely grim. There's an incredibly unusual energy within young Hufei. Calling it a natural gift isn't quite right, but his very constitution is unlike anything I've ever seen. I recall a man with similar talent appearing in the Jianghu once. About 300 years ago, he single-handedly defeated all the demonic sects, big and small. Eventually, he led the new demonic sect to war against the entire righteous martial world. That battle nearly annihilated the demonic sects, and even the 9 great schools lost 90% of their fighting strength. After that, the entire martial world wanted to destroy this demonic leader. They set up 50 seals, using their own soul force to seal him for 7 or 8 years. Finally, everyone joined forces to destroy him. Fortunately, there was no evil energy within young Hufei. I even felt his energy was incredibly pure. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have had to make a decision that would break my granddaughter's heart today. Young Hufei looked at the old man blankly, momentarily unable to understand his thoughts. But the old man suddenly took out a blue pearl, the size of a chicken egg, sparkling and emitting a very pleasant aura, and gave it to him, saying it was to thank him for treating his granddaughter, and for helping his granddaughter. Lu Mai saw her grandfather return to the room, not knowing where he had been. Asking him only made her more confused about what he was saying. "I just went out to catch a chinlone." Little Hufei left, recalling the old man. The old man from Yuanzhou gave him a pearl called the ice-breaking condensing star pearl. After confirming that wearing the pearl didn't increase his power, he reluctantly accepted it. The old man, seeing little Hufei's exceptional talent and hearing him say he didn't care for fame or fortune, found him rather interesting. Back in the room, the young woman looked at her grandfather curiously. Having been raised by him since childhood, she was used to his strange ways, but still couldn't believe that dragons truly existed. However, her grandfather had never lied to her, so she felt a pang of regret at not witnessing it herself. Seeing this, the old man gave his beloved granddaughter a kind smile and comforted her. "It's still a young dragon. When it matures, it will surely bring great change to this world. If fate allows, you will surely meet again." Hearing this, Lu Mei suddenly had a feeling, could her grandfather be implying something else? Meanwhile, in another room, Hofei was meditating, stabilizing her cultivation. But she unexpectedly discovered that her internal energy was flowing more smoothly and was more condensed than before. I don't know if the old gentleman who took my pulse earlier did something. But one thing's for sure, this regulating technique not only stopped my dizziness, but it's also gradually deepening my inner strength. This is definitely a good thing for my dream of mastering both literary and martial arts. But I still haven't thought of a better way, so I'll just go to sleep for now. But he didn't know that the ice-breaking condensing star pearl was slowly emitting a warm, pure, and calming energy within him. And so, another day quickly passed. In Jinzhou City, while his mother was marveling at the changes in her hometown after 7 years away, his father suddenly noticed a group of uninvited guests approaching. Little Hu Fei cleverly recognized the other person as the young master of the Blade Sect, the best bladesman in the province. Their families had no prior feud, but due to the long-standing rivalry between the Blade Sect and the Sword Sect in the province, they had always been at odds. To save face, after meeting, both sides pretended to be friendly. However, both sect leaders were no longer young, and now they began to compare their successors. The Blade Sect leader, Pang Jia, opened his mouth and said, "I hear the young master of the Heavenly Sword Sect seems to be quite averse to martial arts training. Even his basic physical abilities are still as weak as a noodle." His words were gentle but carried contempt, which instantly enraged Hu Hantian. His powerful inner force surged out, shaking the entire street, causing everyone to fall to the ground. Pang Jia, seeing Hu Hantian's overwhelming aura, also felt a surge of excitement and was about to draw his blade for a decisive battle. But his eldest son stopped him. "This is the Pang family's territory, after all. If grandfather appears too weak while fighting his son-in-law, I fear it will damage the Blade Sect's reputation." Standing not far away, Hu Hantian heard these words clearly. He was astonished. The boy was so young yet so thoughtful. Beside him, young Hu Fei grew even more uncomfortable. He understood that his father was being humiliated because of him, and anger burned in his heart. Seeing that the other party had no intention of making a move, young Hu Fei's mother said calmly, "Rumors are mostly fabrications. Besides, this is a matter of our Heavenly Sword Sect. What does it have to do with the Pang family?" Stung by these words, Pang 13 suddenly laughed loudly. "Indeed, perhaps the rumors are just false. Our Heavenly Sword Sect's reputation has always been fluctuating. Everyone, please don't worry too much." The other party was clearly mocking his parents, and young Hu Fei could no longer sit still. He immediately retorted, "Grandfather's birthday is still half a month away. It's natural for them to arrive early. But the Pang family arriving in Jinzhou City so early, what are your intentions?" Retorted by a junior, Peng Shisan was furious. He had long wanted to teach this arrogant Tianjian sect a lesson but hadn't had the opportunity. So he ignored his surroundings, drew his saber, and prepared to fight. Hu Hantian was about to accept the challenge when he was suddenly pulled back. Little Hu Fei, with an innocent and blameless expression, looked at his father and whined that he was hungry, saying he wanted to go to his grandfather's house for dinner. The boy even deliberately rubbed his belly, making rumbling sounds. Acting as if he didn't understand what was happening, he pushed his father away. This scene stunned Peng Shisan. The tense atmosphere was completely ruined by this little rascal, turning it into a farce. Seeing no further opportunity for a fight, he could only helplessly watch the family leave. Everyone thought the boy was naive. But the Pang family's eldest son suddenly had a bad feeling. Wasn't the timing that kid grasped too perfect? If he were just stupid, fine. But if not, his calmness and adaptability are a level above mine. If that's truly the case, I fear this kid will be my greatest obstacle in the future. In his backyard, young Hu Fei discovered the formation that sealed the demon years ago, covered in cracks from attacks. Each footstep seemed to have a different effect, arousing his curiosity. Even the boy, who had no interest in martial arts, felt compelled to discover the secrets behind each step. But just then, a cough suddenly sounded from behind him, startling the captivated boy. Seeing it was his grandfather, he breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that since witnessing the argument between his father and Pang Jia during the day, the little bandit had been forbidden from entering the back courtyard. For these two major powers representing the martial arts world, the meeting and argument were just a minor incident. But the two young masters had different feelings about it. It was unclear whether Peng Shisan was too suspicious or the little bandit was too naive. But the first person to discover that the boy might be a hidden talent was the young master of the Dao sect. However, he had no proof, so when his father asked, he didn't elaborate. The Broad Saber clan is a venerable martial arts sect. Hu Hantian married the clan leader's daughter. And so they've been somewhat suppressed these past few years. This time, the clan leader is celebrating his birthday. If it weren't for his reputation in the martial arts world, they wouldn't even want to come offer their congratulations. They arrived early simply because they had some business to attend to in Jinzhou City, so they decided to stay. Meanwhile, Hu Hantian led his group to the Peng family estate about 50 minutes later. The estate's large gate and high walls amazed young Hu Fei, who was visiting for the first time. After dinner, night had fallen. Young Hu Fei stealthily made his way to the back courtyard. Though he didn't care for martial arts, he suddenly channeled his internal energy, his face serious as he performed a set of fist techniques. Using a set of techniques he had created himself in his spare time, he practiced alone after dinner.
Humming a tune, the little boy skipped along, intending to find his grandfather. But before he could reach him, he was stunned by the sight before him. Before him were 10 stone blocks arranged in a complex formation. His grandfather was curious why his grandson was interested in such a complex thing, and not expecting a child to understand anything about it, casually asked for his impressions. Still somewhat unfamiliar with his grandfather, the boy blurted out, "Is it a formation combined with martial arts variations?" Hearing this, the old patriarch was stunned, looking at his grandson with a puzzled expression. Then he heard little Hufei say that the stones seemed to contain some kind of pattern, and arranging them in different positions would create different effects. Some positions seem to enhance strength, some increase speed. Some have a defensive effect, and the formation itself seems to have other uses. But this was the first time he had seen such a strange thing, so he couldn't immediately distinguish what it was. The old master became more and more astonished as he listened. This martial arts formation, as far as he knew, was the most mystical formation in the current martial world. He himself had studied it his whole life to understand the basics, and then miniaturized it in this garden for his descendants to study. But unfortunately, he had no heir and hadn't used it for a long time. But this formation seemed to have been seen through in his grandson's eyes. Listening to his tone, it seemed like it was the first time he'd seen the 5 elements formation. Thinking about this, he looked at his grandson with sharp eyes, as if trying to see right through him. Finally, he could only come to one conclusion. His grandson was likely a prodigy. If he were to pursue cultivation, he would likely encounter no obstacles. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was his grandfather's grand birthday celebration. With the presence of heroes and prominent figures from all corners of the martial world, the entire Peng estate bustled with activity. The Peng family had even specially invited a troupe of dancers to perform the 5 elements and 8 trigrams dance. They combined the 5 elements and 8 trigrams, creating a unique performance. But young Hufei, the host, showed little interest, preoccupied with enjoying the feast. He was very satisfied with today's banquet. For the past few months, his grandfather had dragged him off every day to study the 5 elements formation and forced him to train. So he was already fed up. Heeding his maid's reminder to maintain his composure as the host, he decided to eat his fill first. Besides, he really couldn't appreciate the dance performance on stage. On the contrary, his usually stern grandfather seemed quite pleased with the arrangements. As soon as the opening ceremony ended, representatives from various sects came to congratulate the Peng family patriarch. His grandfather graciously thanked everyone for attending. But just then, a discordant voice rang out. It was the Blade Master sect leader again, these women twirling and swirling on stage. Where do I see any trace of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams? My grandfather's birthday celebration is being defiled by these insignificant nobodies. The dancers suddenly became objects of amusement for the crude martial artists. Even the little bandit's mother didn't expect the Blade Master sect to dare cause trouble at the Peng family estate. The boy's father felt murderous rage towards this fool, but the patriarch hadn't spoken yet, so he didn't dare act rashly. But the older the ginger, the hotter it burns. The patriarch looked at Peng Shisan with an impassive expression, waiting for the commotion to die down. He suddenly said that he hadn't thought things through, and the performance was indeed not very dignified. Peng Shisan was stunned. He didn't expect the Peng family head to humble himself like that. Then, the family head suggested that Peng Shisan and his grandson have a friendly sparring match. The first to react was young Hufei. He was thunderstruck. His parents also found it baffling and quickly tried to stop it. Little Hufei had always resisted martial arts training. His current foundation was forced upon him by his older brothers. Although he was born with a natural talent for swordsmanship, he was still too young. How could he possibly compete with Peng Shisan? But the family head's gaze didn't waver, calmly looking at his grandson below. Peng Shisan, as if hearing a joke, quickly agreed for fear the other party would change their mind. Seeing the two sides reach an agreement, and having been sold out by his grandfather, little Hufei began to regret it. Why did I have to follow my parents here? Now, look what happened, I'm about to get beaten to a pulp. His father, seeing no other way, could only helplessly look up at the stage. If there's any danger, I might have to intervene. At this moment, the person who walked up to face him was Peng Shisan's third son, Peng Shirgu. Rumor has it that despite his young age, he has already reached the 4th stage of soul power, and his mastery of the heavenly defect blade technique is exceptional. And Hu Han Tianqing also mentioned the word young. More and more rumors spread, and everyone watched intently from the observation platform, their eyes fixed on this unevenly matched duel. On the entire testing platform, only his grandfather maintained a calm demeanor, as steady as Mount Tai, but even he wasn't entirely sure what to expect. A few days prior, he had investigated his grandson's situation, but the boy was exceedingly strange. He clearly had no soul power, yet his body emanated an aura that startled even him. He figured this battle would offer some clarity. After instructing them to bow to each other, the boy suddenly noticed the bulging muscles on his opponent's arms, and excitedly ran over to Shirgu, admiringly declaring that his opponent's robust physique was truly enviable.
This skin tone looks a bit too tanned, lacking a certain aesthetic appeal.
I don't quite like it.
Shirgu was infuriated by this strange comment, and then heard the boy seriously say, from my observation, excessive sun exposure can make the skin very dry,
and even cause an unpleasant rough feeling.
Little Hu Fei rambled on, his words flying everywhere, and Shirgu finally couldn't take it anymore. He felt that the other party was mocking him. So with a light push, he sent Little Hu Fei staggering back a few steps. With a loud roar, he brandished his saber and charged.
Instead of calming the situation, it only agitated his opponent further. Young Hu Fei inwardly groaned,
barely managing to block his opponent's saber strike.
He was shocked to discover not only was his opponent incredibly strong,
but also extremely cunning, nearly knocking the sword from his hand. Shirgu then unleashed a series of powerful attacks, forcing his opponent to retreat continuously.
He realized that, just as the rumors said, this kid seemed to have no soul power and hadn't practiced any sword techniques.
He was nothing more than a punching bag at this point.
The kid was dazed by the barrage of fierce attacks. Seeing this, Bone Demon seemingly didn't want to miss the opportunity,
and delivered a powerful slash towards young Hu Fei. Hu Fei's life hung by a thread, about to be killed in front of everyone, yet unable to cry for help. And this was the front yard of his maternal grandfather's house, the Blood Shadow Grand Trial, where famous martial arts experts had gathered. Although he was forced onto the platform, he couldn't simply resign himself to fate for self-preservation. His opponent was very strong. If the previous blade had gone an inch deeper, I'm afraid he won't escape death either. But that kid has only scratched the surface of swordsmanship.
He definitely won't be able to withstand Pine Shirgu's attacks. If we don't come up with a plan, I'm afraid he'll be severely injured. The grandfather, watching from above, also focused on his grandson. His feelings were complex.
The martial world is an extremely cruel place. Even geniuses, without experiencing life or death situations, rarely achieve greatness. And for young Hu Fei, this will be a rare opportunity. After all, I can still control the current situation. At this moment, Peng Shisan, watching his son displaying his prowess, suddenly became worried and softly said,
if the patriarch is worried, I can tell Bone Eater to go easy on him.
After all, the difference in strength in this match is too great. At this moment, young Hu Fei on the stage seemed to have made a decision. He's carried this sword technique since birth, so he can't fully utilize it. His family's swordsmanship is somewhat unique, making it difficult for him to compare with others. But he can still proficiently use basic moves like thrusting, slashing, and parrying. Suddenly, the long sword in his hand emitted a faint green light. Clearly, he hasn't cultivated soul power, but at this moment, he could heat the long sword with internal energy.
Ready, he looked at Bone Eater with a determined gaze, and said, currently, I only know these 3 offensive moves. I hope you won't laugh.
His words caused a stir amongst the audience below.
Shirgu looked at young Hu Fei as if he were a fool,
thinking he could use basic swordsmanship against the heavenly flaw blade technique that the Peng family had honed for years.
It was practically suicide.
Looking at his parents on the stage, Hu Fei seemed oblivious as to why his son would use such mediocre techniques against a renowned bladesman.
Lu Jia anxiously cried out.
Though she usually disliked her unmotivated younger brother, she couldn't help but worry about him now. Seeing the boy courting death, Shirgu lost his playful mood. He wanted to teach this little bastard that underestimating his family's heavenly flaw blade technique would be the biggest mistake of his life. Afterward, the two faced each other again, but Shirgu's speed had clearly increased a lot. No matter how he attacked, his opponent easily dodged, and even counterattacked. As their weapons clashed, Hu Fei discovered that his opponent's speed and strength were on a completely different level than before. Seeing his flawless blade work, Shirgu felt even more smug. He raised his long saber high like a victor, ready to bask in the cheers of the crowd. But the gasps from below startled him. Little Hu Fei was now standing, breathing a sigh of relief. If he hadn't made so many flashy but useless moves, I wouldn't have had the chance to see his attacks so clearly. At this moment, Hu Fei could only lament the loss of the precious clothes his mother had prepared for him. Now, they were torn to shreds like rags, with no trace of their former glory. Seeing this, his mother in the stands couldn't bear it any longer, her face darkening. She hurriedly begged his father to stop them. Their opponent had clearly just used a killing move, yet pretended it was an ordinary technique. If this continued, Feier might really die right there. But his grandfather remained unusually calm. He simply comforted his daughter, "My grandson only needs to use these 3 moves well, and they'll be enough to fight against experts. If he's truly in danger, I will definitely intervene." Hearing this, Feng Am didn't know what else to say. How could she know?
that at this moment, her father was extremely worried about his grandson. "My little great-grandson, how long do you intend to let the dragon within you slumber? His life hangs by a thread, about to be severed by a sharp blade." But at the critical moment, a familiar yet clear voice rang out from the crowd. Looking in that direction, the legendary young woman, Lumai, was also in the crowd. Her voice was so soft. Yet why could he hear every single word? At this moment, the young man realized how ridiculous he had just been. "So smug just because you dodged my sky-piercing blade. Making your opponent even angrier, their killing intent intensifies." Hu Fei clearly felt that killing intent. Though it only flashed and disappeared, but why do I still feel so chilled? Little Hu Fei was unaware that just as Shirgu's killing intent arose, his older brother warned him through voice transmission not to carelessly release his killing intent. That's why most people didn't detect his murderous aura. But even though Shirgu had calmed down, he wasn't going to let the little bastard who repeatedly provoked him off so easily. He swung his saber down forcefully, sending a blinding stream of earthfire hurtling towards the bandit. So-called overwhelming force conquers all. No matter how cunning the little bastard was, disregarding technique and focusing solely on speed and power, he definitely couldn't withstand it. Little Hu Fei accurately blocked the blow, but this gave Shirgu a perfect opportunity. He followed through, bringing his saber down on Little Hu Fei's front. The powerful force destabilized Little Hu Fei's lower body, and Shirgu wasn't about to give him any chance to recover. He wielded it effortlessly, dancing in his hands, raining down blows that young Hu Fei couldn't defend against. With such a difference in skill, Hu Fei would likely be defeated within a few more moves. Little Hu Fei also understood, even his shoulders were numb. He definitely couldn't hold on much longer. But he didn't know why. As the girl's whisper echoed in his mind, time seemed to stop around him. A warm feeling spread from his chest throughout his body, and suddenly an extreme clarity filled his mind, as if he could, at this moment, easily target any exposed part of his opponent's body. When he came to his senses, the first thing he felt was the sudden silence of the entire arena. Then, my sword pierced Shirgu's stomach. This sight left everyone present agape. Pang Shisan spat out the mouthful of wine he had just taken. Shirgu's wound wasn't deep, but he felt like his world was collapsing. Then, my grandfather's gentle voice rang out, "Thank you for the wonderful performance, you two." Everyone snapped back to reality. Hu Han Tian and his wife looked as if they were dreaming, overjoyed for young Hu Fei. But at this moment, Hu Fei's face darkened. Thinking about what he might face in the future, he wasn't happy at all. He sighed in resignation, making Shirgu beside him feel incredibly embarrassed. Now completely paralyzed, he thought his opponent must have been hiding his true strength, waiting for an opening to strike. Looking at the little rascal in front of him, he felt the other boy was unfathomably deep. Completely forgetting that he himself had just been exploiting his advantage to attack, not to mention any martial arts technique. The cheers of the crowd rang out, and young Hu Fei became even more certain that his peaceful days of reading would be few and far between. Thinking of this, Hu Fei really didn't know what to do. He didn't want to be beaten, nor did he want to cultivate, but in the end, he certainly wouldn't be able to escape his father's authority. Not being able to do what I want, for little Hu Fei, the more I think about it, the more frustrated I get. But at this moment, Shirgu was kicked out by his older brother. He frowned, disgusted with this younger brother who embarrassed him. Pang Shisan, seeing that staying would only bring more embarrassment, a moment later, took Huang Jia and bid farewell to the Hu family. On the way, he scolded Shirgu, ordering him to obediently seclude himself upon returning to the Huang family, and not to come out until his soul power broke through to the 5th rank. At the same time, the grandfather and grandson were walking in the opposite direction. The two seemed to have something on their minds, remaining silent for a long time. The young woman suddenly turned and reproached her grandfather for giving that bead to that boy. It was the Ning Xin pearl that she was born with. Although that boy did seem special, why hadn't he discussed it with her first? The young girl, Lu Mei, suddenly realized she might have spoken too harshly to her grandfather and fell silent. But thinking about the danger that bead could bring, she was truly uneasy. So she had her grandfather stay here with her to wait for Xiao Hu Fei to appear. Just now, the bead on him had reacted. Thinking back, he must have detected its whispers. He would come looking for her, wouldn't he? The young woman, as beautiful as a flower, now seemed distraught. She thought that if he heard her voice, he would come to see her after the banquet. But, reminded by her grandfather, she realized that he probably didn't even recognize her, let alone leave the Hu family to find her. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt embarrassed by her own wishful thinking, and the young woman became flustered. Just as she was about to leave with her grandfather, she heard young Hu Fei call out from behind her. Turning around, it was indeed Hu Fei. This made the young woman, who had just given up hope, even more confused, unsure whether to be happy or relieved. But hearing little Hu Fei call her mysterious maiden, she felt a surge of anger and wanted to give him a good kick. But then she thought, it had actually been over half a month since they last met, so it was pretty good that he even recognized her. However, when Hu Fei suddenly asked Lu Mei why she was there, the young woman had a bad feeling. She stammered, saying that her grandfather had brought her to see the commotion. Only then did Hu Fei notice the old gentleman who had given him the Ningxing pearl was also there. He hurriedly bowed respectfully to the old man. The old man looked at little Hu Fei, this true dragon, with a hint of kindness. At this moment, he wondered why, in such a noisy environment, without sound transmission or sensing spiritual energy, he could hear Lu Mei's voice. He figured the old gentleman must have done something. But Lu Mei was unhappy. She angrily said their grandfather-granddaughter relationship was irrelevant. The Tranquility Pearl was her natal pearl, and he gave it away without her permission, now taking credit for it. She was instantly furious. Seeing Lu Mei's anger, Hu Fei hurriedly said, "So you were the one helping me all along." These words hit the mark. Lu Mei's previous annoyance vanished, and she appeared overjoyed. But suddenly, Lu Mei remembered that although this pearl had a calming effect, it was an extremely keen treasure. If she wore it, she would often feel unwell, so grandfather always kept it for her. Is it really all right for him to wear it? Hearing the young woman's concern, young Hu Fei generously said, "Although I don't like practicing martial arts, I am still a man, this bit of cold energy is nothing. On the contrary, I've been sleeping very well recently, I haven't even been dreaming much." The two of them continued walking and chatting. Seeing his granddaughter hadn't been this happy in years, the old man was also very relieved. Lu Mei had undergone extremely harsh training since childhood, so in reality, she was quite sensitive. But this naive and honest young Hu Fei, with his innocence and optimism, seemed to make his granddaughter feel particularly close to him. What neither of them knew was, the old gentleman's gift of the Tranquility Pearl to young Hu Fei actually had a deeper meaning. But now it seems he may not need to interfere in their fates any longer. Before parting, Hu Fei, anticipating his next meeting with the young woman, felt a pang of reluctance. At this moment, Lu Mei was particularly optimistic. "Don't worry, our hearts understand each other. We will definitely meet again." Only then did Hu Fei cheerfully see the grandfather and granddaughter off from Jinzhou City. However, happy times are always short-lived. Upon his return, he feared his father would subject him to even more grueling training than before. Thinking of this, his good mood from just now plummeted. A few days later, at the Supreme Blade Sect, the Pang father and son had returned. Pang Shisan was furious with Shirgu's performance at the Hu family, and his face had been grim for days. Looking at his youngest son kneeling before him, his anger intensified. The Feng clan had dominated Hebei for nearly 100 years. Years ago, the old sect leader, in his attempt to break through the soul-time barrier, succumbed to chi deviation, giving the Heavenly Sword sect the opportunity to rise and challenge the clan. But I've never experienced such humiliation as today. At this moment, Pang Shirgu stammered an explanation. That Ho brat is too strange. He doesn't seem to have any strength, but it's like he can see through every move. So, in the end, I chose to use my internal energy against him. I apologize, father. I will definitely not let this happen again. The two brothers originally shared a deep bond, but within the prestigious Peng family, they received completely different upbringings. Both took pride in their status as young masters. But the younger brother inherited his father's arrogance, possessing a simple mind but lacking intelligence. After being defeated by Hu Fei, he harbored resentment. Even though he was imprisoned for self-reflection, his anger wouldn't subside. Pang Shiming, however, was more meticulous. He clearly understood that for the Tyrant Blade sect, accumulating strength was far more crucial than his two younger brothers. If he and his brother couldn't surpass their father, they would only become sacrifices beneath his illustrious reputation. Only, the pressure on their father was even greater. Although his spirit power was strong and his heavenly gifted blade technique had reached the 9th level, he was still far from the old sect master's strength. Now that the old man had succumbed to chi deviation and fallen into a coma, if the Tyrant Blade sect continued like this, that it would vanish into thin air within 10 years. A few nights later, Pang Shisan was practicing as usual in the courtyard. The Pang family's broad and heavy saber, sharpened only on one side, was rarely used even among martial artists. Although possessing immense destructive power, it was extremely difficult to control. Since the old sect leader, no one had reached that legendary realm. All of this made his training even more arduous. But today, a few unfamiliar voices suddenly appeared. Although the broad saber sect was no longer as powerful as it once was, it wasn't a place where small fry could barge in as they pleased. Ban Shisan knew these people were definitely not simple, but upon meeting him, they didn't ask about his father, and instead mocked the once prominent, now declining, saber blade sect, leaving him utterly perplexed. Without another word, they revealed the face hidden beneath their black cloak. and attacked him with a strange aura. Upon impact, he realized the newcomer's internal energy was even more profound than his own. This only further fueled his competitive spirit. He immediately channeled his soul power, condensing all his internal energy, and under the dazzling blade light, charged towards them. But this slash didn't even touch the other person, not even grazing their clothes. Several subsequent attacks were easily dodged by the mysterious figure. This scene left Pang Sher-san somewhat bewildered. Seeing that even the heavenly gaping blade technique couldn't injure his opponent, his breathing grew heavy. This small detail was noticed by the other person. Perhaps realizing the disparity between them, he stopped toying with the young sect leader and drew out a thin silk ribbon, lashing it across Pang Sher-san's face. It was clearly a light lash, but the delicate silk ribbon seemed to transform into steel. Holding him tight, he couldn't move. His opponent grabbed him and threw him hard to the ground. Only then, lying in the deep pit, did Pang Sher-san lose his will to fight. His eyes widened, finding it unbelievable. He was the esteemed young sect master of the Supreme Blade sect, so why was he being controlled so easily? He staggered to his feet, only to have his collar grabbed. Feeling the pressure on his throat, he realized just how weak he truly was. Moreover, when he carefully sensed their presence, he realized that each of them possessed an incredibly powerful aura. He cried out in frustration, "What do you want?" Seeing this, the other person helped him up, seemingly making things easier. He said they weren't there to threaten the Blade sect, but to give them a gift from heaven. He said he'd heard their sect leader had been in a chi deviation coma for years, and they had a way to wake him. A Dharma protector of the demonic sect wants to heal the leader of a righteous sect? He placed his hand on the Pang clan's sect leader, suddenly striking 4 death acupoints. The sect leader's whole body trembled, his complexion turning ugly. But the Dharma protector, known as Heavenly King Lao Zi, didn't seem to care, quickly turning around and striking the Yongquan and Jiaji acupoints on the sect leader's back. Suddenly, the sect leader spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. He could gradually feel his chi circulating within his body, but it looked like he was awakening a wild beast devoid of consciousness. Pang Sher-san, standing beside him, was extremely tense. However, his father's life force was indeed gradually recovering, which made him feel a sense of relief. He had tried every method to treat his father, but all in vain. But now, his father clearly had his own consciousness, and his fingers even made cracking sounds. The celestial venerable finally stood up, sighing in relief and said, "I understand your worries, but we shouldn't rush to bring the Pang family head out of his possessed state." He took out a piece of paper, handing it to the extremely agitated Pang Sher-san. But the prescription on the paper startled him. He didn't understand how all these highly poisonous substances could be used to save someone. Before he could recover, he heard the other person say, "Every day, you must press on these 4 death points to help his chi circulate." This made Pang Sher-san even more tense, but after thinking it over, the other party really didn't need to go to such lengths to harm the Broad Saber clan. He nodded seriously. Through the subsequent conversation, he learned they were from the profound Yin cult. Not only could they cure demonic possession, but they could also help people strengthen their inner energy and greatly improve their cultivation. This incredible ability astonished even Pang Sher-san, a seasoned wanderer of the martial world. But if what the other party said was true, this would be a great opportunity for the Pang family. The request they made was simply to help them eliminate another force, namely the Green Fox clan in Lin Valley, Hebei. Due to the demonic cult's special nature, if they acted too openly, it would attract the attention of the righteous sects, which was why they sought out the Broad Saber clan. After they finish, they will move to where the Clear Lake sect resides. But they don't want to be discovered by the other martial arts sects, so they chose to treat the old sect leader. After all, a complete cure takes time, and they don't dare risk the old sect leader's life. Hearing this, Pang Sher-san finally breathed a sigh of relief and agreed to their proposal. In his eyes, the current situation of the Hegemon Blade sect was like being on the edge of a precipice. If he could take advantage of the demonic sect, it might not be a bad thing. 2 days later, at the Heavenly Sword sect, Hu Fei had returned to his estate. I had just been complaining about how comfortable it was at home, and was about to go back inside to read when I heard the steady, powerful sounds of training coming from the martial arts courtyard. I poked my head out to look, and sure enough, it was the same familiar scene. The instructor was still there, shouting, "If you don't train hard now, you'll never amount to anything in your lives." These words reached my ears, and I found them utterly absurd. In my opinion, diligently studying was the safest and most effective way to sharpen one's mind. But I didn't want to argue with the instructor, best to avoid him if I could. Suddenly, one of the disciples saw me and shouted. The disciples who were training quickly turned their heads, and the training ground instantly became chaotic and noisy, like a marketplace in an uproar. Are all talking about the news of him defeating young Master Pang. Some admire him, some respect him, and some feel that Zhang Wang Only at this moment, young Hu Fei's face is full of worry. His biggest fear has finally come true. Now the entire Heavenly Sword sect knows about it. He doesn't know what he will face after the reward period his father granted is over. So he gives a dry laugh and hurries to the study. But on the way, a melodious voice rings out, "Enlightened Emperor's crown, destined for greatness." Then, he once again enters the dream world he experienced before. But this blessed land is different from before, as if it has experienced some kind of splendor. He is a chosen one, yet he worries about inheriting the family business being. Ever since he defeated the second Peng's son in the competition, little Hu Fei had been pondering this question, contemplating a change in his usual demeanor. Should he acknowledge his genius or continue feigning ignorance? He carefully observed the place. Unlike before, this blessed land now seemed to have experienced some kind of former glory. Then, he used his mental power to sense the world within the cave. Suddenly, Hu Fei discovered golden true qi within the cave, slowly converging in front of him. He had never seen this before, staring wide-eyed at the phenomenon before him as the golden color gradually condensed into the shape of a dragon. Suddenly, a golden light flashed, and a lifelike dragon appeared right before his eyes. Little Hu Fei stared at this golden dragon, still unable to believe his eyes. This dragon looked incredibly imposing, surrounded by dense golden true qi. Although its body wasn't very large, its undeniable pressure made little Hu Fei involuntarily gasp. Meanwhile, outside the dreamscape, pulled into a dreamscape by the true dragon, Hu Fei's physical body lay fast asleep in the real world, muttering something about a true dragon and qualifications. Suddenly, he felt a numbness in his head, and the dreamscape vanished. Woken up by his second older sister poking his head, young Hu Fei looked up to see her standing with her hands on her hips, a frustrated expression on her face, questioning him. But at this moment, eldest sister quietly approached. She pretended to be angry and questioned them both. "Where did you learn your manners? He is the young master, after all. You must speak to him with respect. Even if you can't do it now, you must at least maintain basic courtesy. That way the servants will respect you more." Second sister quickly fell silent after hearing eldest sister's criticism, but Hu Fei wasn't so lucky. A young master should act like a young master. Or do you want to act like a little boy who hasn't grown up yet? Hearing his elder sister's words, little Hu Fei nodded repeatedly. Seeing him completely convinced, she softened her tone. "Resting a bit is fine, but on the condition that you eat this first." As she spoke, she took out an exquisite box from her bosom. Not long ago, a great master from Shanxi came to the city, named by Yunlin. He acquired a very rare medicinal ingredient, which, after being meticulously refined by many people, became this pill, called the Huangdao Bui Yuan Dan. Because he's from the same hometown as my brother-in-law, he gave him 2 pills. Hu Fei understood his elder sister's intentions, but his ambition wasn't to practice martial arts. He hastily said, "Elder sister and brother-in-law are the ones most suited to use the Zodiac Rejuvenation Pill." But his elder sister understood young Hu Fei's thoughts, saying that her husband had already taken one, and she, being pregnant, couldn't casually use such a pill. Before young Hu Fei could refuse, she popped the pill into his mouth. After swallowing the pill, Hu Fei was about to reproach his elder sister, when he suddenly clutched his stomach, clearly feeling a violent churning in his gut. "My internal organs felt like they were burning." Young Hu Fei wanted to vomit the pill, but the yellow Dao supplementing origin pill had already melted into his body, flowing through all his meridians. He clearly felt a surge of violent true qi spreading. At this moment, young Hu Fei's entire body was flushed red, his meridians bulging, as if hot water was flowing through him. He hurriedly used the ice-cold cultivation technique of the mountain manner to suppress it. Half an hour later, young Hu Fei finally suppressed his boiling blood, and his complexion gradually returned to normal. Hu Fei realized the potency of the pill, and took the opportunity to absorb the effects of the yellow Dao supplementing origin pill. He circulated his cultivation technique, gathering the scattered true qi into his dantian, then opened his meridians, guiding the energy to the acupuncture points throughout his body. Although it was known he possessed extraordinary talent for martial arts, but even though it was his first time using a qi-enhancing elixir, Big Sister was still very worried about his body. Due to the overwhelming medicinal power, little Hu Fei floated in midair. Big Sister watched this scene in shock, knowing she had miscalculated. Little Hu Fei's dragon physique was unintentionally activated by Big Sister. She knew this elixir was potent, but she didn't expect the hidden energy within Hu Fei's body to be even greater. Little Hu Fei possessed excellent natural talent and carried dragon blood, but he had yet to channel the dragon qi into his body. Dragon qi doesn't significantly affect martial arts cultivation, but it can smooth out any obstacles during breakthroughs. As a result, with just a single elixir, he had unconsciously reached the peak of the 3rd stage of soul power. Even the side effects of the on his physical body, amplified by the dragon's energy, became a form of body refinement. However, at the same time, the pain that little Hu Fei had to endure was also many times greater than others. Hu Fei couldn't understand this earth-shattering change. His eldest sister, beside him, sensed Hu Fei's soul power continuously increasing to the third rank and witnessed the strength of his physical body manifested in a single step. She understood that the medicinal pill's effects on him were 10 times stronger than on an ordinary person. But she didn't say anything, only reminding Hu Fei not to be afraid and to try it out slowly. Inside the forbidden grounds of the Tyrant Blade sect, with the assistance of 4 chosen guardians, the old sect master was carrying out the final step. The 4 of them were dispersed, standing in the 4 cardinal directions. The guardians formed hand seals, preserving their vital energy within their dantians. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out, and a 9 palaces 8 trigrams formation materialized around his body. Pure true essence surged into the sect leader's body. His face contorted in pain, as if he were enduring a great tribulation. But at this critical moment, the 4 Dharma protectors unleashed their power simultaneously, successfully driving the true essence into his body. Suddenly, the sect leader opened his mouth, and the runes on his body were drawn into it. Purple true chi erupted from within him, lifting him into the air as the runes on his body grew more distinct. As the true chi subsided, the sect leader of the Tyrant Blade sect, who had been on the brink of death, seemed to regain his senses, sitting cross-legged in the center of the formation. Witnessing this, the chief guardian eunuch quietly approached and whispered to the sect leader. By taking the prescribed medicine and resting for a year, his body would return to its peak condition. Only then did the sect leader turn his head and look at the group who had also just awakened. He had sensed upon their awakening that their strength might even surpass his son's, but they were still not worthy of his regard. Hearing this, the sect leader scoffed and said that half a year was too long, 3 months would suffice. This request might cause them to double the dose of poison. I fear he won't fully recover before the poison takes effect and kills him. However, the current sect leader, with his profound soul power cultivation and years of tempered internal strength, doesn't consider the small amount of poison to be anything significant. Seeing his resolve, even the Jade Emperor himself would have to agree. At this moment, their associate, 13, arrived to deliver the remaining payment for their collaboration. After learning about this transaction, the sect leader felt that 13 was working too slowly. It was just the extermination of a small sect, so why weren't the preparations complete yet? While caution is good, it has allowed the Heavenly Sword sect to grow stronger. After 13 left the room, the Pang family's young master suddenly asked his father if they attacked the Clear Fox sect without provocation. Is the public opinion in the martial arts world truly beneficial for the Saber sect? As a father, how could he not understand this? But the old sect leader had spoken, and this matter made him extremely dissatisfied. He could only tell the eldest young master not to worry, as the old sect leader roams the martial arts world, commanding respect and fear from everyone under heaven. As long as the old man is in charge, let alone Hebei province. But looking at the entire martial arts world, the Pang family is definitely in the top 3. Thinking of this, even knowing they might have chosen a path of earth-shattering consequences, the Pang family could only sink their ships and burn their bridges. They are a bunch of bastards, although not demonic cultists. Their core is extremely wicked, disguising themselves as a righteous sect while committing despicable and vile acts. Even the local officials have accepted their fair share of bribes, allowing the Green Lake sect to run rampant in the surrounding area, unopposed. However, this small, insidious sect is about to become the target of a plot. Not far from the Green Lake sect, there's a tavern, where 2 unfamiliar women suddenly arrived today. The 2 sat drinking together. Due to a disagreement with her servant, the mistress seemed extremely upset. The wine in her hand seemed to lose all its flavor as she gulped it down, ignoring her maid's attempts to dissuade her. She even urged her maid to drink a few cups, saying it was too boring to drink alone. However, this scene happened to be witnessed by some people sitting at the next table, and the one leading them was none other than Gu Yong, the young master of the Clear Lake sect. He was a lecherous man, and seeing this, he immediately had wicked intentions, already planning in his mind what he would do today. Stealthily approaching, he saw the young lady's appearance and felt even more fortunate. Gu Yong's lackeys secretly snickered at this. They understood that these 2 young women likely wouldn't see tomorrow's sunrise. Gu Yong then pretended to politely greet them, saying that he wanted to invite the 2 young ladies for a few drinks, and specifically emphasized that he was the young master of the nearby Clear Lake sect. Seeing him take the bait so easily, she wondered if her brother had been too naive. Men, it seemed, really did understand each other better. So, feigning disdain, she cut him off, tilting her chin and telling him to get lost. Her maid, not understanding the situation, excitedly pointed at them, telling them to stay away from her mistress. This string of face-slapping actions would have angered even an ordinary dandy, let alone Gu Yong, who was used to throwing his weight around. He put his hands on his hips, tilted his chin up,
and told the maid to shut up, saying it wasn't her place to speak. Seeing her maid being bullied, Peng Xiuyu splashed wine in Guyong's face. His disciples, seeing their young master humiliated, were all worried and uneasy. Even for the Green Lake sect, if he openly attacked someone in broad daylight, I'm afraid he would be condemned by the righteous factions. Guyong actually understood this, but he immediately bowed his head and apologized to the two young ladies, saying he only wanted to make friends. Peng Xiuyu thought he wasn't as aggressive as she imagined. But right after, Guyong suddenly leaned close to Peng Xiuyu's ear and whispered that she absolutely couldn't leave this tavern. Hearing this, the girl finally breathed a sigh of relief. If this guy wasn't so despicable, she really would have felt a bit reluctant to attack him. A sarcastic smile playing on her lips, she told him, if you still consider yourself a man, then don't resort to such underhanded tricks. If you dare, then attack me now. In Guyong's eyes, these words were truly like the sun rising from the west. Those who had been threatened by him, which one of them hadn't trembled and begged, trying every possible way to escape his control? Why is there such an ignorant girl appearing before me now? She even deliberately slammed her sword on the table, almost provoking me. If I had any guts, I'd attack right now. If I back down, I shouldn't try to show off in front of her. At this moment, provoked, Guyong didn't care how many eyes were on him, and kicked the table in front of the two girls away. He simultaneously drew his sword and stood facing her. Although holding a sword, the girl used saber techniques, each strike powerful and decisive. At first, Guyong was a little overwhelmed. This scene took the maid by surprise. According to my elder brother's plan, I should have been slightly injured. It's just that his swordsmanship is too weak. Even though I held back this much, it's only a draw. It's really too difficult for him to injure me without it being obvious. The maid was still thinking about telling her brother to increase her pay when she got home, but Guyong was already sweating profusely. How could this woman be so strong? She was originally the eldest daughter of a prominent martial arts family. Outwardly, she was drowning her sorrows at the tavern to avoid an arranged marriage. But in reality, it was because her family was up to something with this small local sect. Under the constant harassment of that young master, she pretended to finally snap and engaged him in a duel. However, being a skilled bladeswoman, in order to conceal her true identity, she had to switch to using a sword. This made her attacks appear fierce and imposing, but in reality, they were all for show. While the eldest miss seemed to have the upper hand, none of her strikes landed any critical hits. Each time, her opponent easily dodged with a slight shift of his body. After a few exchanges, Guyong seemed to have noticed something. Facing the oncoming sword once again, he was no longer as panicked as before. Seeing the impending blow, his body suddenly vanished, reappearing in the blink of an eye beside Peng Xiuyu, his attack changing accordingly. Before she could react, his sword pierced her thigh. A sharp pain shot through her, and Peng Xiuyu couldn't help but cry out. Seeing her wounded and unsteady, he raised his right leg and kicked her hard in the stomach. She was sent flying. This scene frightened the maid beside her. She hurried over to check on her mistress's injuries. Seeing that her mistress's life wasn't in danger, she turned and scolded Guyong, demanding to know if he realized the consequences of attacking members of the Peng family. Hearing this, the thugs were momentarily stunned. But quickly, one of the disciples retorted, questioning why, if they were truly from the Peng family, would they be in such a small town? Furthermore, the Peng family was the foremost blade sect. The weapons used were all sabers, but she used a sword. Before they could respond, Guyong was struck as if by lightning. No wonder her swordsmanship was so clumsy during the fight, she was clearly using a sword like a saber. Suddenly thinking of something, Guyong couldn't help but tremble. Seeing the maid take out the token representing the Peng family's identity, and hearing her say that her young mistress was unwilling about the marriage agreement, she had secretly run away to avoid it, and for fear of being recognized, she switched to using a sword. Hearing this, the others seemed to have no more doubts. Only Guyong's expression grew even uglier. I not only just teased him but also seriously injured her. With things having come to this, I'm afraid even if I do anything, the Peng family won't let me off. Thinking for a moment, he signaled to his companions. They looked at each other. Although worried, they also understood that they had run into serious trouble. Most of those present realized this wasn't a place to linger and decided to risk escaping. But a disciple blocked them at the main door. Another quickly slammed the main door shut, afraid to let anyone escape. Enraged, Sujiran lashed out at the innocent people present. Soon, only the severely injured Peng Xiuyu and he would remain. Now, I just need to deal with these two, then set fire to this place, and no one will know what happened today. Thinking of this, Guyong sneered, see, this is the consequence of offending me. With that, he raised his sword, intending to finish them off. But at this moment, he suddenly heard the sound of the main gate being smashed open. A man entered, leading many disciples. Seeing the demon blade on the newcomer's back, Guyong froze in place.
The little maid burst into tears upon seeing her young master and cried out, "My lady is severely injured." Pang Xiuyu glanced at his boss, his eyes seeming to say that tonight, they must eliminate this group of people. Seeing things going smoothly, young Master Pang didn't want to waste any more words with them. He waved his hand, his voice as cold as the winter wind. "Protect the young lady. Kill the rest." Gu Yong, once a young master who controlled everything within 100 miles, now found himself in dire straits on his own turf. At this moment, the disciples he had brought with him were almost all dead or wounded. Looking at this hellish scene, he didn't realize that he had once been the same to others. Only the miserable screams ringing in his ears kept him paralyzed. My body was enveloped by a chilling murderous aura, as if my very soul was about to dissipate. Just as I was on the verge of despair, a calm voice echoed in my ear, asking if I had carefully considered my choice. But the owner of this voice didn't wait for my reply. A terrifying force suddenly surged forward. Ko Dong jolted awake, hastily, raising his sword to block. But he never expected this strike to be so powerful. The moment their weapons clashed, his entire body was sent flying. He crashed heavily against the wooden door. He flew several meters before coming to a stop. Kwang struggled to get up, but found his whole body paralyzed. He looked despairingly at the man before him, someone about his age, but whose strength was on a completely different level. Boss Peng stood at the door, arms crossed, seemingly without an equal. His handsome face held a sneer. Because of his exceptional looks, he always wanted to compete with the young master of the Ba Dao clan. Suddenly, a panicked subordinate of the Duong family rushed in, reporting that they had found a beggar surnamed Daiyin. Turning around, he saw this man stammering, his body covered in wounds. Boss Peng just smiled, telling him not to worry about his life, but he had to testify about what had happened earlier. Gu Yong also gradually recovered from his terror. He wasn't a fool. Everything had happened too suddenly. The Peng family's eldest daughter had suddenly appeared. The Peng family's young master had appeared at the right moment, overwhelmingly powerful. And then there was this beggar who couldn't be ignored. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem like a coincidence. But Gu Yong no longer had the chance to understand. This is actually a premeditated conspiracy, a conspiracy targeting the Clear Lake sect. Suddenly, screams of anguish came from within the estate. 2 days later, early morning, on a mountainside, Pang Shisan, leading his disciples, coldly watched the Clear Lake sect leader ahead. Pang Zhilong stepped forward and whispered a few words to his father. Pang Shisan nodded and said coldly, "Leave no one alive." The disciples immediately charged towards the Clear Lake sect leader. Meanwhile, inside the Clear Lake sect estate, disciples were training in the courtyard. Seeing a menacing crowd rushing towards them, only as they got closer could they see each person wielding a weapon. Before they could understand what was happening, the attackers charged. Only then did the gatekeeper disciples react, hastily sounding the alarm bell. But Pang Zhiling had already led his men through the gate. In the eyes of the Clear Lake sect disciples, these men were killing without a word. The gatekeeper disciples were caught completely off guard by the sudden attack. A powerful clan, skilled in martial arts, each and every one of them radiating a murderous aura. After a group of men in black stormed in, screams of terror echoed through the Qinghu sect. Yet resorting to such despicable and vile acts to achieve their goals. The Peng clan's eldest grandson, after dealing with the Clear Lake sect's leader, reported to his father, "Everything is under control. From now on, the Clear Lake sect will no longer exist in the Jianghu." Pang Shisan looked at the piled-up corpses, feeling they were truly useless. Then he asked, "This operation, its purpose was to rid the people of harm, so is there any witness to testify to this?" At this moment, the beggar standing beside him, looking flustered, Dian Shower stepped forward and said he could prove it. Then, Pang Shisan instructed Dian Shower to find crowded places, and spread the news. Shower quickly nodded. 6 days later, Dian Shower arrived on the streets of Qingcheng Mountain. He casually approached a tea house and said in a slightly raised voice, "Have you heard? That depraved young master of the Qinghu sect yesterday not only harassed a young woman, but also hit her. Then the young woman took out the Peng family token, and that beast even tried to kill her. How audacious!" The surrounding people, who already despised the Qinghu sect's despicable behavior, began to chatter and criticize the young master, calling him a bully who relies on his family's influence. Seeing everyone discussing the matter, Dian Shower added, "Fortunately, the young woman was petite and managed to escape into the kitchen. Then, she was saved by young Master Peng Zhilong. I witnessed it all." Everyone who heard felt relieved for Tian Shower. They also applauded the Peng family's actions. The rumor that the Qinghu sect beast tried to harm a member of the Peng family, and was ultimately punished by them, spread throughout the streets and alleys. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a group of people was slowly approaching a mountain manor. A closer look revealed them to be members of the Xianin sect. Their young master led the way, dressed in a black cloak, his expression cold, but between his eyebrows, still radiating an air of smugness. Seeing that the Peng family had cleaned the place up, he was very satisfied, and ordered his subordinates, take the rest of the Peng family back, give them a small gift, show some concern. Mainly I want them to speed up the excavation, don't delay the important matter. The servant by his side, Ing Shang, has reached the skin-tempering realm. A complex look flashed across the young master's eyes. A different aura emanated from him as he gazed steadily ahead, seemingly having a plan already laid out. His fists clenched, a conspiracy about to unfold. Meanwhile, after parting ways with Xiao Wufei, Lu Mei and her grandfather, Feng Wujian, arrived at a deep mountain forest, surrounded by towering peaks. This was the first time she had set foot in this desolate place. The two of them made their way through the dense forest. Though young, Lu Mei was quite capable. Climbing mountains and fording streams was no problem for her. They then arrived at a seemingly desolate spot. Perched precariously on a steep cliff face was a small, dilapidated tower. She asked doubtfully, "Grandpa, isn't this the place? It looks like an ordinary thatched hut." The old man reminisced about the past. "That's right," he replied, "I spent 2 years here collecting documents back then." With that, the two of them stepped inside. Upon entering, Lu Mei realized this was truly a unique grotto. Strange statues, eroded by time, were carved into the cave walls, and vines grew lushly everywhere. Lu Mei observed as she walked. They arrived at a place resembling an altar, seemingly covered in randomly placed talismans. Both stopped in surprise. Looking at the cave entrance that appeared ahead and the signs of a struggle on the nearby altar, the old man couldn't help but wonder. Could someone have been here before us? With such a high cliff, they must have known some secret to come here and investigate. It took me almost 2 years to discover the traces of the Tianfu battle hidden for 300 years. Clearly, this secret has already been unearthed by someone else. Lu Mei looked at the dark cave entrance, a little scared, and asked, "Grandpa, what is this cave?" The old man didn't answer but told Lu Mei to take out another pearl. This pearl is called the heart-stopping pearl, also known as the heaven's dance-sensing stone. No matter how weak Lu Mei is, it can stimulate the potential within her body. Lu Mei placed the pearl in her hand and told her grandfather that they could begin. Then, she sat cross-legged, holding the heart-stopping pearl, slowly channeling her internal energy into it. The old man stood behind her, gradually channeling his true chi into her body. As the true chi flowed in, the pearl gradually emitted a strange light. Lu Mei closed her eyes, gradually controlling the heart-stopping pearl. Moments later, the gem emitted a blinding light. The old man closed his eyes, muttering, "I wonder what the future holds." He and his grandson wanted to use this gem to foresee the future. However, the result was unexpected. This gem, also known as the Heaven's Dance-Sensing Stone, was born at the same time as Lu Mei. Besides activating the latent power within her body, it could also use vital energy to probe origins and predict the future. However, the old man couldn't obtain any clear information. He coughed, saying that this might not be a bad thing. Otherwise, the appearance of two five elements geniuses in the same generation would disrupt the balance of the 5 elements. He worriedly asked, what if both the righteous and evil sects each have someone possessing this talent? The current peace and prosperity will be shattered, won't it? Indeed. The old man didn't answer, only sighing, what is to come will come. I just need to cultivate well. That boy's true dragon chi needs to be awakened, otherwise, his entire clan will be destroyed. As he spoke, the old man walked out. Seeing her grandfather's worry, Lu Mei softly called out, "Grandfather." The old man also understood that overthinking was useless. After all, those chosen by heaven had their own destiny. At this time, at the Heavenly Sword Manor, little Hufei's parents decided to have him enter secluded cultivation because of his defeat in the previous martial arts competition. They brought the still bewildered little Hufei to the family's secret inheritance grounds. After passing through a deep, dark tunnel, a large stone gate appeared before their eyes. Little Hufei looked at the gate curiously. Carved on the gate were vivid, coiling dragons, emanating an ancient and mysterious aura. At this moment, Hufei's father spoke, "Generations of manor lords have undergone secluded cultivation in this heavenly sword cave, and it is thanks to this that our family has grown stronger through each generation." Little Hufei yawned, thinking to himself that he had been dragged here early in the morning to listen to stories about the cultivation of past estate lords. Just as he was about to ask more, his father clarified the purpose of this trip. "From now on, you will be confined in this cave to cultivate on your own." Hearing this, little Hufei froze, knowing that nothing good was going to happen. This place was dark and damp, a complete waste of his beautiful youth. His father added, "This heavenly sword cave is the sacred ground of our clan." Then he said, "Open the cave door. Eldest sister, go ahead and turn the switch." The door opened, and a strange fiery light emanated from within. Little Hufei felt extremely tense. His father, understanding his son's thoughts, and to completely extinguish any thoughts of escape, said, "Only when your soul power reaches the 7th level can this door be opened. Before little Hu Fei could react, he was kicked inside. He fell flat on his face. Looking back, he saw that it was his second sister who had given him a swift kick. She winked at him and then clasped her hands together. With a loud bang, the cave door slammed shut. Little Hu Fei was left alone in the pitch-black cave. His second sister teased him from outside. Men have to obey their parents, you know. Under the flickering firelight, little Hu Fei gradually saw clearly the situation inside the cave. The Heavenly Sword Cave wasn't very large, with statues left by his ancestors placed on both sides, in all sorts of postures. Although they had been eroded by time, they still exuded a majestic air under the firelight. At this moment, little Hu Fei felt a sense of peace, finally having time to reflect on his inner life. From now on, no one would bother him anymore. He turned his head, recalling his father's words, that if his soul power didn't reach the 7th level, he would be trapped here forever. He remembered that. My oldest sister is the most talented of my siblings. It took her 3 years to reach the 7th level. If I add the time I want to spend learning other things, I can't imagine how much time I'll waste here. Thinking about wasting my entire youth here, I feel incredibly discouraged. Compared to others my age, they don't have to endure this arduous cultivation. Right now, I should be strolling by the lake with girls, enjoying a life of lavish spending. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but sigh. Calming myself down a bit, I had to accept my fate. If that's the case, I might as well take this opportunity to cultivate and escape this place soon. Thinking so, he stood up and walked to the weapon rack. Picked up a spear. Swung it a few times, gradually getting used to its weight and power. He remembered when he was born. The family secret was to utilize vital energy and movement techniques, unleashing astonishing power during combat. Vital energy circulates within my body, bringing forth endless strength. I train diligently, and soon these movements will become second nature. I understand that to reach the 7th level of soul power, I must strengthen my physique and hone my reflexes. My reactions must be faster than thought. Gradually, I, little Hu Fei, became immersed in my training. My vital energy surges, powerful and abundant, providing endless power. At this time, I still don't know my true strength, nor do I know the immense transformations the 9 dragons roaming art will bring. My talent carries an air of unparalleled excellence. Yet I always desired the carefree life of a scholar and artist. But fate often has other plans. His father had placed all his hopes of breaking through to the 5th level on him. Under immense pressure, Bai Paju felt disturbed and his blood boiled. Ever since being imprisoned in this Heavenly Sword Cave, Hu Fei had lost his joy of shopping. He knew that only by diligently increasing his soul power could he leave this place early. Then, he remembered his innate sword technique and planned to refine it step by step. Only by focusing my chi to a single point can I unleash the true power of my swordsmanship. But I don't know that the mental disciplines I've grasped are things most cultivators can't achieve in a lifetime. Finished practicing, young Hu Fei stopped. Although I can easily grasp the subtleties of the swordsmanship, my body can't keep up. After thinking for a long time, I realized it's probably because I'm still young, and everything is still developing. However, he wouldn't stop because of that, unless he wanted to waste the entire morning in this godforsaken place. He had to quickly increase his soul power. 3 hours later, little Hu Fei collapsed to the ground, exhausted, complaining about how difficult it was to increase his soul power. It was many times harder than before. When would he finally reach the 7th level? Hu Fei was lying on the ground, dejected, when he suddenly heard someone call from outside the door, "Young master." He quickly sat up and looked towards the stone door. This voice seemed to belong to the little maid who served his eldest sister. He heard the little maid politely say, "Young master, your dinner has arrived." Only then did little Hu Fei realize that the entire day had passed. He stood up and walked towards the stone door, but saw a tray brought in, containing only a few simple medicinal pills. He thought to himself, could this be his dinner? The young maidservant hurriedly explained, "The master instructed that during your seclusion, you are only to be provided with pills to replenish your vital energy." Hearing the maidservant's explanation, young Hu Fei felt a surge of anger. Starving all day, he felt like he could devour everyone who watched the video without liking or commenting to help the channel grow. Yet his father only gave him a few pills. This was his first time in secluded cultivation. Shouldn't he be eating plenty of meat to replenish his strength and help him cultivate better? As if knowing he would complain, the young maidservant said, "While eating meat can replenish a lot of energy, it's not good for refining the body of a cultivator." Hearing this, young Hu Fei felt like he was being treated like a porcelain doll. Looking at his pitiful eyes through the crack in the stone door, the young maidservant sensed his hunger. Then, another basket of steamed buns was brought in, along with the words, "If you're too hungry, you can eat some of these buns to stave off your hunger." Little Hu Fei stared blankly at the basket of buns, feeling like he was being teased. Why didn't they bring them out sooner? They let him go hungry for a while, While he was eating, suddenly, a stack of books was thrust at him. They said the eldest miss told them to bring them for him to read. Looking at the stack of books, he was curious about his eldest sister's intentions. His eldest sister usually disapproved of his preference for literature over martial arts. Why did she send so many books today? When he opened a book, he was immediately stunned. As expected of his eldest sister, these books are all about the 5 art secrets, meticulously marked and carefully annotated. Eldest sister is so meticulous. Besides detailed records of the Heavenly Sword Clan, there are also several martial arts techniques, from basic to advanced, with complete theory and practice. He's overjoyed. Looking at this mountain of books, young Hu Fei was ecstatic. But he's in the middle of a soul power breakthrough. If he reads these martial arts secrets. At this time, he still didn't know that this book was the cause of the strange phenomenon. Little Hu Fei panicked and closed the book, stopping his reading. But at this moment, that voice rang out in his head again. Immediately afterward, his body trembled, and his eyes flashed with golden light. Hu Fei was pulled into the blessed land once more. He saw golden light sparkling ahead. Hu Fei was pulled into the blessed land once more. He saw shimmering golden light ahead. It seemed someone was calling his name. He slowly stepped into the cave, and discovered a golden true dragon coiled atop the cave ceiling. Little Hu Fei stared at the true dragon and reached out his hand. At that moment, a mantra echoed in his mind. The great Tao is vast and boundless, like the azure sky. Only by being acknowledged by the golden dragon can one receive the inheritance. Hu Fei silently recited the mantra, gently stroking the plants within the blessed land. Toward the demonic sect. The other two were both speculating about what the sect leader was planning. The guards, seeing that the newcomer was the head of the Peng family, hurried in to report. The Protagonist sect leader, who was inspecting the construction, heard the report and said, "The head of the Peng family requests an audience?" Hearing this news, the sect leader suddenly remembered that previously, in exchange for this item, they had cured the Peng family's sect leader of his demonic possession. He thought this was the end of the matter, that the two sides would have nothing more to do with each other. Lost in thought, he was suddenly interrupted by the appearance of the old sect leader. The two met but neither spoke. The Peng family sect leader exclaimed, "Your sex methods are truly ingenious." Only then did the protector notice, surprised by how quickly the old sect leader had recovered. He then coldly asked, "You've almost fully recovered. Why have you brought your disciples here?" The old sect leader coughed, saying he was old and had come out for a stroll to clear his head. Hearing the clinking sound from within the cave, his expression suddenly changed. He said with a smile that he was very interested in what they were digging. Hearing this, the protector thought to himself, "I wonder what this old man is planning. Is he plotting something against me?" But the sect leader ignored him and continued, "You're working so hard. There must be something valuable in this cave." The protector hurriedly explained, saying they were digging a secret training ground. The sect leader simply scoffed at this excuse. A secret base in such a conspicuous location was a first for him. Seeing this, the demonic sound sect leader couldn't hold back any longer and signaled to his protector. This old man was clearly. At this moment, the protector was extremely worried. He wasn't afraid of the Peng clan's young master being killed, but of offending the sect leader. Who would have thought the cult leader would say, "Don't worry. The old sect leader provoked us like this, clearly wanting to use this opportunity to probe our strength. As he wishes, let's teach this arrogant brat a lesson." Witnessing his grandson's display, the old sect leader was startled. He didn't expect the boy to value the family's honor so much. At the same time, he also wanted to see just how strong his grandson truly was, so he signaled for everyone to step back. At this moment, in the middle of the courtyard, the two cautiously engaged in combat, the light of blades and the shadows of swords flashing. Facing the young master, the Protagonist cult leader didn't seem to mind, only smiling faintly. Suddenly, he unleashed his power and vanished from his original position in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, he appeared before the young master, blocking his escape. The Peng family's young master was startled by his sudden approach. He hadn't expected such speed from someone so young. As the two grappled, the Peng young master finally reacted, hastily raising his blade to parry the blow, narrowly saving his life. But as his blade descended, he realized the other man had vanished. His power was such that even 10 of him would be no match. The Peng young master was now drenched in cold sweat. He knew that if his opponent hadn't held back, simply raising 2 fingers to block the attack, the blade stopped right before his eyes. This sight terrified Peng Jilong. This level of power, perhaps even the old sect master couldn't achieve. Before he could recover, the sect leader channeled his internal energy. In an instant, black energy spread throughout the courtyard. Peng Jilong jolted awake, but it was too late. He was forced to his knees by a terrifying pressure. Only then did he realize that he had always regarded the other party as a junior. But on second thought, with just a wave of his hand, he commanded the Hwin Sect's protector. He had been careless and underestimated his opponent, overlooking such a crucial detail. No one expected this scene. The old sect leader was also shocked by this kid's power. He is more than my equal. This kid must be the Hwin sect leader. So young, yet his power has reached this level. If I let this kid cultivate with him, my family's future will be immeasurable. The kid prostrated on the ground, even though his grandfather asked him to follow a demonic cultivator. But he, the young master of the Hegemon Blade sect, having to submit to the evil cult, felt deeply resentful. But they didn't know, this was one of the demonic cult schemes today. The clash between Pang Zhilong and the Profounding cult leader was decided in the blink of an eye. Although this cult leader looked young, his strength was unfathomably deep. I never expected that during the more than 10 years I was in slumber, someone could grow to this extent. I originally intended to use my nephew's situation to probe the Profounding cult's strength. But unexpectedly, not only could my nephew not fathom this person's realm, but it also far surpassed my own. It seems the demonic cult is also a place teeming with hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Now is not the best time to vie for supremacy in the martial world. As the cult leader withdrew his hand, the tense atmosphere in the courtyard eased. The old sect leader considered that the Profounding cult wanted to destroy the demonic cult, and since this place was within the Peng family's sphere of influence, they could lend them a hand, and also ensure the Profounding cult wouldn't encounter any obstacles here. Hearing his father's words, the Peng family sect leader didn't understand why their prestigious family would need to flatter such a small cult like the Profounding cult. The cult leader wasn't surprised upon hearing this, as if he had already anticipated it. Looking at Peng Zhilong kneeling on the ground, he let out a cold laugh and asked, "What are your conditions?" The old sect leader looked at his grandson and said, "This boy is the future heir of our family. I hope your esteemed cult will allow him to study by your side." Peng Zhilong was extremely surprised to hear this. He never expected his grandfather would want him to study with the demonic cult. However, being a matter of his elders, how could he dare to interfere? Upon hearing this condition, the Hwin sect leader immediately guessed the sect master's ultimate goal. If it was just about teaching him cultivation techniques, it would be a perfect opportunity to set a trap, making it easier to control the Peng family later. He agreed to the cooperation. Seeing that everything had been discussed, the sect master left his young master and departed. He was very satisfied with this collaboration, believing it was the path to the Peng family becoming the martial world's overlords. Peng Zhilong remained stunned, unsure of what to do. Doubt filled his heart. If he continued to strengthen his soul power, he wondered if he could reach the same level as the sect leader and lead the Peng family to become the martial world's overlords. Just as he was pondering, a voice echoed in his mind, "Do you truly desire to strengthen your soul power and become as powerful as the sect leader? We can keep our promise and help you temper your body, cultivating the primordial chaos body." Hearing this, Peng Zhilong's heart surged with excitement. He hastily pleaded with the voice to impart this long-lost supreme skill. Unexpectedly, the protector, upon hearing this, burst into laughter. Then, suddenly falling silent, he coldly said, "Is this your attitude towards learning?" Peng Zhilong was speechless, not knowing what to say. Thinking about enduring humiliation for the future of the Blade sect, he felt this little bit of humiliation was worth it. From today onward, this is yours. It doesn't conflict with the internal energy of any sect. If you can grasp its meaning, your soul power will be immeasurable in the future. Seeing Peng Zhilong deep in thought, the Dharma protector added, "After you master the primordial chaos body, and with our demonic sect backing you, unless you're a fool, you'll surely know what to do next." Having said that, he left. Looking at the cultivation manual in his hand, Peng Zhilong revealed a greedy expression. He had witnessed the methods of the Profounding sect, learning anything from them was a huge opportunity. The sect leader quietly asked, "What about Hu Fei?" The Dharma protector replied with a smile, "That brat is engrossed in the secret manual." The Dharma protector scoffed, "These martial artists, just give them some secrets and they'll obediently follow orders." Meanwhile, Hu Fei, locked away in Heavenly Sword Cave by his parents, was going crazy. He had no interest in cultivation, but he realized something: this couldn't go on. If I continue this, I'll truly go mad, but I can't make no progress either, or my father won't spare me. Thinking this, and to get out sooner, I reluctantly started cultivating again. I've grasped a little of the essence of the Nine Heavens' profound lightning arts, and I believe that as long as I practice it tens of thousands of times. He began to replay them in his mind. Suddenly, he realized he'd overlooked a key point. Eldest sister spent 2 years comprehending these 17 variations, and another year memorizing them. But I completely grasped them in just a few days. Could it be concluded that I've reached the realm of a prodigy? Hu Fei pondered over it, still in disbelief. I must be mistaken. Hu Fei possessed extraordinary talent, born with innate potential. Right now, he was practicing his family's secret technique, and in just a few days, he had reached a realm that would normally take ordinary people several years to achieve. The speed was so fast that even he was astonished. He clearly remembered that when his eldest sister went into seclusion, it took her 2 or 3 years to fully comprehend this family technique. If he followed this logic, wouldn't he have already reached the 7th level of the drunken dragon capture technique? Hu Fei couldn't believe his own judgment. Although his family always said he had a talent for martial arts, how could he have fully grasped the family's secret technique in just a few days? He pondered, wondering if he had made a mistake somewhere. As he did so, the drunken dragon capture technique once again surfaced in his mind, causing him to frown slightly. There's really no problem. The entire cultivation method, the movements, the circulation of qi, I truly understand everything perfectly. At first, there were still a few vague points. But after being pulled into that blessed land by Jinlong, everything became clear. After some reflection, Hu Fei confirmed that it only took him a few days to comprehend the supreme inherited cultivation method of his clan. Hu Fei wasn't surprised by his extraordinary talent, but rather, he was happy to finally be able to leave this strange place. He happily waved at the statue beside him, thanking it for its company over the past few days. Thinking about how his father could no longer use the family name to pressure him, he skipped out the door. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him. If he just went out like this, given his father's reaction to him mastering the 7th level in just a few days, he would definitely be forced to strike while the iron was hot and continue to seclude himself in cultivation. Thinking of this, Hu Fei shuddered. He had to find a way to avoid being confined by his father again. At this moment, an idea came to Hu Fei. Why not take this opportunity to completely master the drunken fist, dragon capture technique? That way, his father probably wouldn't make him seclude himself again. With this thought, he bent down to look at the moves carved on the base of the statue. Hu Fei muttered the incantations while contemplating the intricacies within them. Reaching the 8th level requires exceptionally high knowledge. Every sword strike, using qi as a foundation, the sword is form, establishing techniques, everything is interconnected. Hu Fei sat cross-legged, circulating his qi throughout his meridians. A burning sensation emanated from his dantian, and he felt a surge of spiritual energy igniting within him. The medicinal pills he consumed daily began to take effect, as if igniting his dantian, causing the qi within his body to explode and disperse throughout his meridians, as if his body were about to be torn apart. The energy condensed within Hu Fei had reached its limit, and he felt as if his internal organs were about to burst. After a series of torments, Hu Fei fell into a coma, his eyes covered by a layer of mist, hazy and indistinct. Then, his consciousness seemed to enter another space. It was an archipelago floating in the void, with lush trees and abundant spiritual energy. Just then, a voice suddenly called out. He turned his head with difficulty, and found several elderly men with a sage-like appearance looking at him. Looking closely, they were Zhang Sanfeng of Wudong, Bodhidharma of Shaolin, and Hong Qigong of the Beggar's Sect. Seeing these figures who only appeared in legends, Hu Fei stood there dumbfounded. Hu Fei, this is your life. Do what you want. At this moment, Hu Fei broke through to the 8th level. A surge of spiritual energy welled up within him. Like a stream flowing from a mountaintop, his vital energy surging endlessly, like an infinite source of power. Hu Fei circulated his energy, regulating his breathing, and exhaled a breath of stale air. He was certain this breakthrough would greatly benefit his future cultivation. He stood up, looking at the sword in his hand, feeling an unprecedented domineering aura. Hu Fei, at this moment, yearned to test his strength, but only these statues surrounded him. Hu Fei thought, well then, I'll use you to practice. As his body moved, a surge of violent true qi immediately enveloped him. The first statue, the second, the third each in turn engaged Hu Fei. But he responded naturally, his attacks and defenses methodical. The statues, in his mind's eye, came alive, radiating violent true qi as they soared into the air, charged straight towards him. In that life-or-death moment, Hu Fei deftly used the drunken dragon receiving palm, facing the statues' attacks, neutralizing each move with ease. He effortlessly defeated them all. Just then, a rustling sound came from outside. He was the young master of the leading family of the 5 mountains, possessing a refined and elegant demeanor. But due to the pressure of inheriting the family legacy, his father confined him to the cave for secluded cultivation, his figure flickering in and out of sight. The surrounding statues were all shattered by his sword's energy. Now, only the imposing Hu Fei remained in the courtyard. He sheathed his sword, sinking his qi into his dantian, regulating his internal energy. Hu Fei sensed his progress, he had indeed reached the 8th level. He rubbed his hands together, thinking that going outside would surely cause a stir within the clan, and couldn't help but laugh out loud. But he remembered his initial ideal of becoming a literary god admired by all. So although he had fulfilled his father's request, this wasn't what Hu Fei wanted. His goal was to change his family's emphasis on martial arts over literature and become a respected literary master. News of Hu Fei's breakthrough to the 8th level had spread. His father, usually modest, led the disciples to welcome Hu Fei as he emerged from seclusion. This arrangement was to prepare Hu Fei for taking over the family in the future. With the sound of mechanisms moving, the stone door slowly opened. Bathed in light, Hu Fei's small figure appeared. He was no longer his usual mischievous self, but instead, imitating the adults, stood quietly, awaiting his father's affirmation and the admiring gazes of the disciples. His father, with a single glance, saw through Hu Fei's thoughts, and announced in a loud voice, "Young Master Hu Fei, of the Heavenly Sword Clan, has mastered the 8th level in less than half a month." Hearing this, Hu Fei's face lit up with pride, practically beaming with the words peerless genius. His second and third elder sisters, seeing his shameless display, wanted to give him a piece of their minds, thinking, "Is this what our future clan leader is like?" At this moment, the disciples began to murmur amongst themselves, unable to believe that their young master had mastered the 8th level of the drunken dragon palm in less than half a month. They lamented that they would likely never achieve such a feat in their lifetimes. He was truly born with swordsmanship in his blood. Hearing their murmurs, Hu Hantian knew his goal had been achieved and cleared his throat to silence everyone. He said sternly, "Young master," after leaving seclusion. The other had a cold demeanor, a tall and sturdy build, and projected an air of dependability. He then instructed the two of them, choose more capable disciples to accompany the young master. They both replied in unison. Hearing his father's arrangements finalized, Hu Fei felt a little bewildered. Thinking to himself, "I'm still so young, how can I represent the clan at such an important conference?" His father looked at Hu Fei with a knowing look, as if he had guessed his thoughts, and encouraged him, "You are the future young master of the Heavenly Sword Manor. And precisely because you are young, this trip is more likely to attract the attention of the martial arts figures. No one is more suitable than you." Hu Fei then claimed that his health was poor. His father expressed his disapproval of his excuse. "Now is the best time for you to mature. This trip will empower you. It's even more effective than secluded cultivation. If you want to grow, you have to step outside your comfort zone." Upon hearing this, Hu Fei lamented how miserable his life was. Then, he reluctantly walked towards the group. Seeing his son's dejected expression, Hu Hantian reminded him, "You have none of the bearing of the young master of Heavenly Sword Manor. When you're out, you must be serious, not childish. You must have the authority of a leader." Hearing this, Hu Fei suddenly straightened up and seriously called out, "Father." Hu Hantian was a little surprised by his son's change, unsure what trick the boy was planning. He watched as Hu Fei, with a serious face, stepped in front of his father and, imitating the manner of an adult, said, "Thank you, father, for giving me this opportunity. I will definitely use this opportunity to atone for my mistakes and turn over a new leaf." After saying this, he knelt down and made a gesture of pledging his loyalty unto death. The whole family was stunned by his sudden seriousness. Humiliated by a defeat, he wanted to die. Then, forced into secluded training by his father, resentment grew in his heart. Now, having mastered his skills, he thought of the humiliation he endured and resolved to take revenge. Pang Shisan watched his son emerge from seclusion, but showed no joy, instead warning him not to disgrace the family as he had before. So they might as well take this opportunity to kill him and restore the Pang family's status. Hearing his son's words, Pang Shisan felt a chill run down his spine. If they wanted to touch the young master of the leading family of the Five Peaks, they needed to consider it carefully and not act recklessly. As if anticipating his father's thoughts, his son said, "I'm not just talking. During my seclusion, I've thought about this thoroughly, and I've come up with this plan. We can find the spider web to handle this. They're experts in assassination, and they leave no trace. As long as Hu Hantian of the Heavenly Sword Clan isn't present, this assassination will surely succeed. With the Heavenly Sword Clan's only son dead, they'll destroy themselves. Then, the position of Martial Arts Alliance leader will be ours." Pang Shisan was slightly surprised to hear this. He hadn't expected his son to have thought it through so thoroughly. But if this is exposed, the entire martial world might join forces against the Pang family. It would be difficult to manage the situation then. Seeing his father's hesitation, the son promised him, "If this is exposed, I will bear all the consequences myself. I won't implicate the Pang family." Hearing this, Pang Shisan understood. His son was determined. Even if he disagreed, his son would find a way to do it. He looked out the window, left a sentence, and then left, "Only the dead don't talk." Pang Shigu knew his father had tacitly agreed. A sinister look appeared on his face, saying he would definitely do it cleanly, without leaving a trace. Meanwhile, Hu Fei was completely unaware of the impending danger. After leaving the Heavenly Sword Manor, he led 5 of his disciples, using their likeness skills to travel. After his seclusion, Hu Fei's internal energy became purer, and his movements lighter. But the 5 men following him were exhausted. This was their first time on a mission with the young master. They held the future sect leader in high regard and didn't want Hu Fei to look down on them. They just couldn't imagine that a 10-year-old Hu Fei could have such powerful likeness skills, clearly surpassing even their own, despite their age and experience. Seeing that the young master showed no signs of stopping, the team leader hurried forward to advise him. He panted, hoping they could rest for a while. Hu Fei, hearing this, seemed a little puzzled and asked if they were tired. Old Lu, gasping for air, said, "We've been using our likeness skills for 4 hours straight. Even if we don't stop to rest, we should at least slow down a bit." Hearing this, Hu Fei stopped. Seeing the young master stop, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, collapsing to the ground, panting. Second Elder Lu's face was pale, his insides felt like they were churning. This was the first time he'd used his likeness skill for such a long time. Seeing the young master standing there at ease, they asked him if he had taken some medicinal pill, as he didn't seem tired at all. Hu Fei calmly asked them in return why they didn't wait until they reached their destination to rest. At this, Second Elder Lu was speechless, and could only make the excuse that they were just taking a short break. While watching them rest, Hu Fei stood in a horse stance, warming up and circulating his qi. At this moment, the team leader asked, "Are we really going to continue running long distances using our likeness skill?" Hearing this, Hu Fei asked in surprise, "Isn't likeness skill the most important kung fu? Don't you diligently practice it during your daily training?" Everyone was stunned. For their Heavenly Sword clan, swordsmanship was the most important, not likeness skill. Hu Fei replied seriously, "Swordsmanship is indeed important, but if you encounter a stronger expert, only with good likeness skill can you escape and have a chance to survive. If you want to take revenge later, you must survive first." Hu Fei continued, "Of course, likeness skill cannot be mastered overnight. While focusing on improving likeness skill, if you unfortunately encounter an expert, you might still be unable to escape and be killed. Therefore, I have valued practicing likeness skill since I was young." Everyone admired the young master's thinking, feeling his words were very reasonable. Having said that, Hu Fei felt they had rested enough, and said they could set off. Hearing this, the 5 of them hurriedly got up and followed. While running, Hu Fei encouraged everyone, "At the 5 leaders' assembly, we can cultivate diligently." The pitiful group was thus led by the young master on a long run. But Hu Fei didn't know that 2 layers of danger awaited him ahead. "This kid is one of the demonic cult leaders. I could have lived a peaceful life, but I willingly sacrificed my life to forge a new path for future generations." He searched tirelessly and finally found this secret within a hidden mountain range. Their founder, the leader of the Shounen sect, 300 years ago, single-handedly defeated countless demons, great and small, and ultimately led the demonic sect into war against the righteous sects. "By the Dharma Protector's order, we disciples shall retreat 3 zhang." The cult leader gazed intently at the lifelike diagram. That familiar shape, the totem of the Protagonist cult. Behind this gate lies the ancestor they've toiled so hard to find. At this moment, black energy surged around the cult leader. He placed his hand on the stone gate, suddenly exerting force, and the stone gate instantly exploded. The mystery he'd pursued for decades was right before his eyes. This young Hu Fei couldn't help but feel excited/thrilled, context needed. Then, he led his disciples and hastily entered the mountain cave. Stepping into the main hall, I saw before me a long sword embedded in a stone pedestal. Over hundreds of years, the blade had become covered in dust, but its crimson veins still radiated a chilling aura. This sword is the treasured life's work of our founding ancestor. Originally, when he achieved enlightenment, it was a pure sword, radiating a holy light. Later, as he led the demonic sect to conquer the world, this sword was stained with the blood of countless innocents. Thus, its blade turned crimson, and it became known as hopeless. Looking closely, 4 iron chains bound the sword, secured to 10 surrounding pillars. Each pillar was covered in strange runes and incantations. The leader of the Protagonist sect gripped the sword, but the murderous aura emanating from it made even him shudder. As he channeled his inner power, the sword emitted a faint bloody glow, as if resisting him. Seeing the sword refuse to submit, he intensified his inner power, and a spell descended from the sky, striking the sword directly. Just as the leader of the Protagonist sect was about to draw the sword, a gigantic figure suddenly appeared in his mindscape. "And the essence of my martial arts within the despair sword, waiting for a descendant to unlock it." Having said that, Bei Tianlai began transmitting the cultivation technique, gradually permeating the young sect leader's body. As the Dharma was transmitted, the ancestor's face became ferocious and terrifying. Years ago, he sacrificed his life to leave this power for future generations. Wasn't it so that one day they could oppose the righteous martial arts world? After the transmission was complete, the ancestor's figure, along with the golden light, transformed into streams of black energy, entering his body. The leader of the profound insect's face was covered in runes, his body having merged with the ancestor's soul. He unleashed all of his internal energy, his blood boiling. He placed both hands on the despair sword and suddenly exerted force. The purple runes on the sword grew increasingly brighter. As the profound insect master's power erupted, the despair sword instantly trembled, its chains shattering, and a terrifying black aura was unleashed. Looking at his ancestor's treasure, the young sect master appeared deep in thought. Sensing the black aura enveloping the sword, he felt the terror of his ancestor from long ago. An earth-shattering battle was about to begin. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Hu Fei was leading a group of people galloping down the road. By now, it had begun to grow dark. The deputy captain, panting heavily, suggested they rest. Second Elder Lu agreed, and hurriedly stepped forward to suggest. It's getting dark. We should rest for a while. Traveling at night is dangerous. Hearing this, Hu Fei agreed to rest for the night in the forest. A moment later, the group stopped in a clearing. Old Second Lu rubbed his knees and complained, "These past few years, I've only focused on sword practice and neglected my lightness skills." As dusk settled, the team leader instructed everyone to gather firewood. "It will be very cold tonight, and there are wild beasts," he said. He then started a fire. Everyone had been running all day and only now had enough energy to talk. Second Elder Lu asked the person next to him where the young master was. The vice captain pointed towards the bushes. "The young master is meditating. Don't disturb him." At this moment, Hu Fei was cultivating, absorbing the essence of the sun and moon. Since leaving seclusion, he hadn't been able to properly control his internal energy. After this experience, he felt his internal energy was boundless. Even with his eyes closed, he could sense the movements around him. For example, the assassin who was about to attack him. He was the young master of the leading family of the Five Mountains, with a refined and elegant demeanor. "I was forced by my clan to participate in the Five Peaks Assembly. My father originally intended to use this opportunity to train me, but he didn't know that this was sending his son to his death." Hu Fei and the group galloped along the road, but his stamina wasn't enough. Second Elder Lu suggested that since it was getting dark, they should rest, which the young master agreed to. The five of them then stopped to rest in a clearing in the forest. Second Elder Lu saw the young master meditating, and couldn't help but sigh, "His physique is truly robust. My lightness skill, cultivated for decades, is no match for it." Afterward, he instructed everyone to eat and then rest, emphasizing that they should not disturb the young master's meditation, leaving one person to stand guard and telling the others to sleep. At this time, Hu Fei was cultivating, absorbing the essence of the sun and moon. A bold thought occurred to him: could he have opened his celestial eye? Though this feeling was a bit absurd, he could clearly sense a kind of consciousness expanding within his sea of consciousness, the state of seeing through all things becoming increasingly clear. Suddenly, Hu Fei's sea of consciousness seemed to explode. He felt like this celestial eye had opened. The heavenly eye lies at the Shinting acupoint, focusing all mental energy on a single point. Hu Fei felt his sixth sense awakening. Under Hu Fei's control of his sea of consciousness, his range of perception continuously expanded. At this moment, within his range of perception, a dark shadow was moving at an extremely fast speed. Its movements were bizarre, and its entire body radiated black energy. Hu Fei didn't know what it was, only feeling that it was strange, thinking it was probably a wild beast, but it was rushing straight towards him. He quickly hid behind a large tree trunk, quietly observing. Waiting for the right moment, the dark shadow soared into the air, charging directly at him. They hastily attacked the assassins, but unexpectedly, their internal strength was superior. Second Elder Lu, the leader of this expedition, knew the enemy was prepared. He quickly ordered everyone to form a defensive formation. The well-trained Heavenly Sword Manor Guards instantly formed their formation, controlling the situation. Meanwhile, Hu Fei was locked in a fierce battle with one of the assassins. However, his opponent was formally trained, while he lacked real combat experience. Hu Fei darted in and out amongst the assassin's chains. "Thanks to my good Qinggong. Otherwise, I would have died under his blade." The assassin was surprised to see this young Hu Fei's impressive Qinggong. He originally planned to kill Hu Fei while he was unaware, but unexpectedly, despite his young age, he could sense the killing intent. This was different from what he knew. Then he asked, "Are you the young master of the Heavenly Sword Clan?" Hu Fei was slightly taken aback and asked, "What's it to you?" Hearing this, the assassin became enraged. "Kids these days are so disrespectful," he said, then swung his chain, intending to kill Hu Fei. Hu Fei blocked the blow with his sword, but his opponent wielded the chain with uncanny skill, wrapping it tightly around Hu Fei's sword. Sensing trouble, Hu Fei tried to pull his sword back, but he was yanked into the air. Before he could react, he crashed to the ground, rolling several times before managing to stand. Seeing his young master thrown, Second Elder Lu was worried, but he couldn't break free to help. The deputy captain urgently called for everyone to protect their young master. Hu Fei told them not to worry about him and to focus on their own fight, saying he could handle himself. Despite his words, his actual combat experience was too limited. Even though he had mastered the drunken 8 immortals, he had no chance of winning this fight. If he continued like this, he would die. At that moment, Hu Fei's fighting instinct suddenly burst forth. His opponent used a soft chain whip, suited for long-range attacks. He, on the other hand, used a short sword, effective only at close range. That was the only way to break his opponent's chain swordsmanship. But his opponent seemed to have seen through his intentions, preventing him from getting close. Then he had to find another way to approach. Looking at the forest nearby, Hu Fei had an idea. Hu Fei turned and ran towards the trees, feigning fear as he went. The assassin was slightly surprised by Hu Fei's flight. He had killed countless people, especially those who didn't like and comment on this video. Did he really think he could escape? Thinking this, he gave chase, jumping up to dodge the opponent's attack. The chain struck a large tree nearby, immediately shaking it violently. Hu Fei quickly rolled, diving under the roots of the tree. But the assassin had already caught up. The soft chain in his hand whirled. Even the surrounding trees were cut down by the sword chi. In the blink of an eye, Hu Fei muttered as he ran, just a little further, to the dense forest. The assassin pursued him relentlessly. His chain whipped towards Hu Fei's head. Hearing the whistling chain, Hu Fei rolled to evade, the chain slamming into a large tree. How laughable. Before my power, you are nothing but a joke. Are you ready? Next year, on this day, will be the anniversary of your death. He channeled his chi into the chain, the weapon in his hand whirling. And in the blink of an eye, the tip of the chain lunged straight towards Hu Fei's head. And in the blink of an eye, unleashed 3 chain shadows, attacking him simultaneously. Seeing the assassin's ultimate move, Hu Fei quickly flew up to dodge. After some maneuvering, he narrowly avoided the deadly attack. However, its force still cracked the ground. Hu Fei hastily flew further away. He not only narrowly escaped death but also quickly counterattacked. He swiftly shot out several silver needles, but they were deflected by the assassin's power, flying some distance before stopping. The assassin, witnessing this, looked on in disbelief. His ultimate move had been neutralized by a 10-year-old child. He was about to strike again, but discovered Hu Fei had already flown up to a nearby large tree, flitting among the branches as if strolling through the air. He stared blankly at the soaring Hu Fei. Was this something a child could do? The assassin regained his composure, and quickly reacted, unleashing a series of moves towards Hu Fei. Seeing the opponent's ruthless attack, Hu Fei twisted his body to dodge the chain. The large tree was indeed broken by this attack. Hu Fei turned his head to look at the soft chain, then spun around, using his sword to strike the head of the chain. Just as the assassin was retracting his weapon. At Zicham, my spirit sword was entangled by the tree trunk and I couldn't retrieve it in time. Hu Fei's timely maneuver, however. In a flash, Hu Fei somersaulted down and swung his sword. The assassin, seeing him charging forward, realized it was too late to retract his chain whip. His only option was to fight back desperately. He twisted his body to the side and leaped into the air, narrowly avoiding the fatal blow. Hu Fei landed back on the ground and sighed in relief, seeing the assassin's predicament. The assassin was now suspended mid-air, without any support. As he seethed with rage, Hu Fei suddenly sprang into action, launching himself into the air. One sword ended the assassin's life. He died without understanding how he could be defeated by a 10-year-old child. And he would never have the chance to understand. The fierce battle had consumed a considerable amount of Hu Fei's spiritual energy. He stumbled slightly when he landed. But this outcome was beyond his expectations. He never thought he could actually kill this kind of assassin. Looking at the assassin he had cleaved in two, Hu Fei was overcome with terror. I just killed someone. He stared at the sword in his hand. This was the first time he'd killed anyone. The horror of it left him paralyzed, completely oblivious to the assassins behind him. Seeing the assassins about to strike the young master, the captain of the guard yelled, "Young master, look out!" The assassins, about to order a retreat, were horrified to see the gunpowder flying towards them. Before I could react, the gunpowder exploded before my eyes, filling the air with smoke. The assassins' coughs echoed from all sides. But they didn't know the smoke also contained a specially made powder, which wouldn't dissipate for a short time. Seeing this, the assassins realized they were outmatched and ordered a retreat. The Hu clan disciples, seeing the assassins fleeing, immediately charged forward to stop them. The Hu clan disciples gathered. The captain said their priority was to tend to the wounded and protect the young master. Hearing this, Hu Fei told second elder Lu that they should take care of the injured disciples. He could look after himself. However, he fell into deep thought. Looking at the corpses scattered on the ground, He thought, if he hadn't acted quickly, he might have been the one killed. Will surely make him an excellent leader. Thinking of this, he suddenly remembered that the young master was the first to discover this assassination attempt. Thanks to his vigilance, they wouldn't have become ghosts under the blade. He hurriedly led the young master away from this bloody scene. A moment later, they stopped to rest in a spacious area, leaving one person to stand guard. After the assassination, Hu Fei, exhausted, also lay beside him fast asleep. However, after his first kill, he couldn't sleep soundly. Suddenly, a pair of jet-black hands silently reached up from the ground behind him. As the arms slowly extended, they suddenly embraced the sleeping Hu Fei. The arms tightened their grip, as if trying to pull him down into the earth. Hu Fei struggled to open his eyes, wanting to see who it was, and saw a pair of completely white eyes staring at him. Thinking his victim had returned to life, Hu Fei cried out in terror. But the sound that came out was inaudibly soft. In an instant, he was drenched in cold sweat, his mouth agape. The enemy grabbed Hu Fei's face and bit it. Then came Hu Fei's scream. Hu Fei suddenly sat up, realizing it was just a dream. Yesterday's assassination attempt still haunted him, to the point of hallucination. It was already early morning. Hu Fei rubbed his arm where the assassin had bitten him in the dream, and sighed with feeling. On such a beautiful day, he hadn't enjoyed it yet. He must live well. Thinking so, Hu Fei secretly made up his mind. He must practice martial arts more diligently. However, he forgot that there were a bunch of people staring at him, like he was an idiot. Lu Laoer chuckled and said, "Is Hu Fei dreaming about going down there with that damn assassin?" After everyone finished packing, they set off. Recalling the assassination attempt yesterday, Hu Fei asked Lu Laoer if they could find out who was behind it. The captain said they weren't certain yet, but they had collected the assassin's weapons and equipment as evidence. He also arranged for skill trackers to follow the scent left by the assassins yesterday, and they were sure to find their hideout. After hearing Lu Laoer's reply, Hu Fei clapped his hands and said, "I hear the beggar's sect is quite skilled at gathering intelligence and handling information. The area ahead is their territory, so let's try our luck there." Hearing this, everyone headed towards the city. Hu Fei was leading everyone into the city. They planned to find the beggar's sect to inquire about some information. Inside a tea house, a lazy beggar was sleeping soundly. At the melodious sound of coins, the lazy beggar suddenly opened his eyes, staring intently at the person who had given him the money. He looked at Hu Fei in front of him, his expression immediately changing. He hastily knelt down and began to flatter him. Hu Fei got straight to the point, stating the purpose of his visit and his desire to obtain information through the beggar's sect. Hearing this, the beggar's expression turned dull. He stammered, feigning ignorance, and asked where the young master was from. Unfazed by the beggar's pretense, the young master solemnly produced the Heavenly Sword Manor token and declared, "The young master of Heavenly Sword Manor greets the chief of the beggar's sect." Upon hearing the name of Heavenly Sword Manor, the beggar seemed to understand. He then stood and said to Hu Fei, "In that case, please follow me." With that, they all rose and departed, taking several turns into a narrow alley. They passed through several doors, arriving at a secluded room. The beggar led them to an elderly man who stared at them impassively. After a moment, the old man asked in a raspy voice, "What business does Heavenly Sword Manor have here?" Lu Laoer hurried forward, handing the old man a prepared drawing and asking if he knew the person and their background. The old man stared intently at the drawing in his hand, muttering to himself as if recalling something. He suddenly said, "There have been rumors in the Jianghu recently about this body-tempering martial art. It's said to be very difficult to cultivate, so few in the Jianghu use it. Therefore, it's not hard to figure out. Unsurprisingly, it's the Shifting Tower organization." Hearing this, Hu Fei quickly asked if he knew their location. However, the old man's answer disappointed them. This organization is always mysterious and unpredictable, their movements secretive. Even within the Jianghu, news of them is rare. Hu Fei wasn't surprised by this result. He then asked if any other sects had been attacked. Also, please recommend a tracking and locating expert. Seeing the old man remain silent, Hu Fei, though young, understood the ways of the world and said, "All fees can be paid by the Heavenly Sword Manor." The old man nodded, understanding they didn't carry much money. His expression changed, and he said they always worked for money and couldn't break their rules. But out of respect for the Heavenly Sword Manor, he said, "I can allow the young master to return and pay later." However, revenge is a matter of urgency. Hu Fei readily agreed. Following the directions, they arrived at a secret room. The young master and old second Lu entered. This tracking and locating technique isn't something just anyone can do. Before arriving, they had heard the old man tell this person's story. His name is Li Su, and he was originally an ordinary man. I happened to learn the Miaozhang tracking technique. After explaining his reasoning, Li Su took out a small bottle from the table, explaining that he would use medicine to enhance his sense of smell. This task was extremely difficult, so he added a fee of 1,000 taels of silver. Hu Fei thought that since he charged such a high price, his abilities must be extraordinary, and agreed to his request. Half a day later, they arrived at the scene of the fight. As instructed by Li Su, Lu Laoer took out gunpowder and lit it at the scene. As the smoke rose, Li Su stepped forward and carefully distinguished the surrounding scents. Following the scent gradually assaulting his nostrils, in a flash, all his meridians opened, and the Miaojiang tattoos on his body turned bright green. He stared straight ahead, the scent was distinct. He felt like he could track the assassin's movements by scent alone. In an instant, images of several assassins flashed through his mind. Relying on the scent, he judged the assassin's escape route. Li Su hurriedly gave chase. However, he soon stopped. He realized that the enemy was very cautious and, to avoid being followed, had deliberately left someone behind as a decoy. But because of this, tracking him is even easier. Following Li Su's trail, it didn't even take an hour. What surprised him was that the end of the trail was a building in the middle of the bustling city. Li Su stared straight ahead, where the scent finally disappeared. Lao Er asked, "The assassin wouldn't be in this building, would he?" Li Su nodded firmly. The deputy captain was shocked. "They're so audacious, setting up their lair right in the city center." Hu Fei wasn't surprised. "They're probably doing this to avoid suspicion. Everyone thinks that these kinds of assassin organizations would be hidden away in the remote mountains." Then I asked Second Elder Lu if he'd found out which sect had been attacked. Based on his investigation and analysis, the largest sect that had been attacked was the Bai Stone clan. Bai Yun Zhao's younger brother, Bai Yun Fei, was assassinated some time ago in the wilderness. The investigation revealed that the assassin was from the Luo web, but the Bai clan doesn't know who the culprit is. I've had someone contact them, and I believe Bai Yun Zhao will respond soon. Hearing this, Hu Fei was secretly delighted, as he just avoided being killed by a 10-year-old. He could borrow the Bai clan's power to take revenge. Now he just needed to wait for Bai Yun Zhao to arrive so they could storm the place and find the culprit. Meanwhile, in the Luo web's lair, due to the failed assassination attempt on Hu Fei, Spider Web's leader, Li Han, was in a furious rage as he listened to his subordinate's report. Below him, a group of assassins trembled, not daring to breathe. Their assassination captain had been killed by a child. He knew his captain's skills well. He couldn't have died at the hands of a child unless it was a plot against Spiderweb. The vice-captain stammered, saying the possibility of a setup was small. Outside investigators hadn't detected any surveillance. Furious at the loss of his right-hand man, Li Han abruptly ordered a halt to all other missions. He demanded everyone focus on investigating the young boy, warning his subordinates to be extremely cautious in the meantime. Just then, a volley of gunpowder charges was thrown towards the entrance of the lair. Before they could react, the charges exploded nearby. In an instant, the entire lair was filled with smoke and fire, everyone coughing violently. Next, a group of warriors in white rushed in, slashing and killing fiercely. By then, the guards had reacted, but it was too late. The Bai family's men had already stormed inside, the fighting intense. Outside, the people from Heaven Sword Villa calmly observed. Their objective is to capture the leader of the La Vong gang alive, then charge in to provide support. At this moment, inside the hideout, the head of the Bai family, Bai Yun Zhao, driven by vengeance for his brother's death, is determined to annihilate the La Vong gang. Meanwhile, Li Han, the leader of La Vong, is stunned, unsure who would dare be so audacious. Upon seeing Bai Yun Zhao, he is utterly shocked. This hideout of theirs was only recently established, few know of its existence, and their movements have always been secretive. But dwelling on this is pointless now. So, he yells, "Bring all the elites from the 4th floor up here." Preparing to fight. Suddenly, a group of fierce men burst through the window. Li Han was stunned by the sight. Who were they? Hu Fei sneered, "Who we are isn't important." Li Han was furious, but knowing this wasn't the time to fight, he used a hidden weapon, killing several of them before escaping. After the chaos subsided, the others broke through the window, only to find the young master gone. They assumed he had chased after the fleeing attackers, but didn't have time to dwell on it, and could only follow the trail. Meanwhile, in another dense forest, Li Han, the leader of the Spider Web gang, was desperately running forward. Cursing as he ran, "Damn the Bai family! They destroyed my 20-year-old base." After running for a while, Li Han stopped. He thought about his lair being destroyed just like that. 20 years of work, all gone. Recalling the recent events, it seemed that they were all related to that little bastard from the Heavenly Sword Manor. Thinking of this, Li Han gritted his teeth. He had to find a chance to kill him. A whooshing sound rang out. He turned his head to look. It turned out to be the kid's sword energy slashing towards him. immediately asked Hu Fei why he was chasing him alone. Hu Fei chuckled and said, "I know you could kill me right here. But I've broken branches, leaving a trail along the way. Before you kill me, they'll arrive."
Hearing this, Li Han continued to run. He knew Hu Fei's strength was weak, and perhaps he could carefully kill him, but he couldn't deal with the heavenly sword manner warriors behind him, so it was better to escape quickly. However, he didn't know that this Hu Fei had already made preparations. Next, he stared blankly at the hand waving in front of his face, unable to believe he couldn't outrun a child. But the current situation forced him to reveal his true strength. In the blink of an eye, 6 clones appeared, running in different directions. Hu Fei, watching the fleeing clones, was astonished by the sight. He hadn't expected this guy to have such a trick. Looking at the 6 clones, Hu Fei carefully observed the characteristics of each one, as well as their posture and footwork as they landed. Meanwhile, Li Han's real body had run to the side of a large tree and hidden himself. Panting, he thought to himself that this time, the kid definitely wouldn't be able to catch up. Those in his line of work inevitably leave traces. Thanks to his superior lightness skill and this clone technique, he's managed to escape pursuit many times over the years. But before he could celebrate, he turned around and saw that little bastard catching up. Li Han was a bit stunned, unsure how he was found. Hu Fei deliberately stalled, feigning helplessness as he began to explain. "I was indeed surprised by your clone technique, but your skill is too poor. Clones are illusory, naturally, they can't leave traces. You just need to follow the clone with a shadow. It's a simple principle." Li Han was choked speechless by his words. Listen to that, is that something a person would say? He himself had deceived countless martial arts experts, yet today he was exposed by a kid. Although he made it sound easy, how could one distinguish their own shadow in the forest? This kid couldn't be judged by common sense. At this point, he could only use his ultimate move, Dark Crossing. Thinking this, Li Han suddenly jumped up. A cloud of smoke enveloped his body. In an instant, only his clothes remained, fluttering in midair. Hu Fei stared blankly at the falling clothes. This Li Han really knew how to escape. Why be an assassin? He should be a delivery guy. Hu Fei stared dumbfounded at the clothes. Li Han's escape method had broadened his horizons. Once I catch him, I definitely need to learn a thing or two. He looked left and right, searching for any trace, but didn't find any clues, meaning he's most likely still here. Watching Li Han vanish before his eyes, Hu Fei's eyes widened, clearly fascinated by this shadow travel technique. He carefully observed his surroundings, finding no escape route. So he used his heavenly eye to search. Meanwhile, Li Han had cleverly burrowed underground. Thanks to his superb hiding and breath-holding skills, no one noticed, just as I expected. This method is effective, but the breathing hole gets blocked easily, so I have to keep pushing the leaves aside. He felt he couldn't breathe, thinking the air hole was blocked again, so he blew hard. He persevered for about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, his face turning red from suffocation. Having no other choice, he crawled out of the ground, gasping for air. At this moment, he saw that little rascal grinning at him, one hand firmly covering his breathing hole. Faced with this situation, Li Han was so furious he felt like his lungs would explode. He demanded, "Do you know what it means that a scholar can be killed but not humiliated?" Hu Fei calmly replied, "Your dust hiding technique is truly ingenious. I almost couldn't find you. I'll give you 89 points. Hearing this, Li Han abruptly jumped up. Thinking he shouldn't tangle with this kid any longer, he hurriedly fled. The dust hiding technique is indeed a very good escape skill. Although not as good as Hu Fei's heaven concealment, this ability to vanish without a trace is considered one of the best in the martial arts world. Li Han knew that continuing like this wasn't the solution and he had to think of another way. So, he leaped high, quick as a monkey, grabbed a branch, spun around, and landed firmly on the branch. 20 years of painstaking work, all gone to waste, he thought. He had nothing left to lose. Even if he died here today, he would drag this brat down with him. Seeing the little bastard pursuing him, he took out the hidden weapons he had prepared, and launched them like a volley of arrows. Hu Fei was leaping through the air. Seeing no way to dodge, I had to risk taking the blow head-on. Li Han thought he was safe, but suddenly his face turned pale. Imprinted in his eyes was the falling smoke, his own prized dark fog technique. Seeing this, he was truly shocked. He had only demonstrated it briefly, not taught it, yet this kid had already applied it in actual combat. Just as Li Han was terrified, he turned his head to look. Hu Fei had leaped high, slashing down with his sword from behind. As Li Han fell, blood gushed forth. Hu Fei fell from the tree, exhausted. He suddenly thought of playing dead to deceive them. But he thought this kid was very clever and it would be difficult to fool him. After some thought, he gave up the idea and struggled to get up. He endured the pain in his back,
waiting for Hu Fei to speak. Hu Fei looked at Li Han lying there, and instead of killing him, he said that if he revealed who was behind the assassination of the Bai family's second master, he would spare his life. Li Han said that if he revealed who hired him, he would have no way to survive in the Jianghu. They only take the money and do the job, they don't investigate their employer's affairs. Hu Fei sighed, as if losing his patience, and drew his sword. I'm not interested in the other assassins, but you must tell me. If you don't tell me the truth, I will use this sword to slowly carve open your wounds and let you die a slow death. Being the leader of the Luo Web and being threatened like this by a child, Li Han felt humiliated. But he is the knife and I am the fish, so I must protect my life. He then asked how he could be guaranteed that the boy wouldn't kill him if he confessed. Hu Fei then guaranteed his safety in the name of the young master of the Heavenly Sword Manor. Seeing this, Li Han had to tell the truth. He said the Qingjian sect in western Hebei was the one who hired them to kill the second master of the Bai family. As for who else wants you dead, I'm sure you know. Hu Fei interrupted, asking if it was the Peng family. After receiving confirmation from Li Han, he asked if there was any proof. Li Han looked exasperated, as if he was being forced into a corner. He fumbled through his clothes, pulling out a thick stack of letters, saying these letters were the proof. But before he could raise his head, Hu Fei kicked, sending the letters scattering. Seeing this, Li Han was furious. Hadn't Hu Fei promised to spare him? Was he going back on his word? Looking at the scattered letters, Hu Fei was secretly delighted. He hadn't wanted to get involved in the affairs of the martial arts world, but he'd been dragged in after all. He told Li Han that he was a man of his word and would definitely spare him. As he spoke, he gathered the letters from the ground, telling Li Han to find another path. Hearing that his life would be spared, Li Han scrambled to his feet and ran, afraid Hu Fei would change his mind. Hu Fei shouted after him, "Do you have any other escape tricks? Show me all of them." Although he had guessed who was behind it, he still didn't want to face this truth. Since childhood, he had loathed martial arts training, preferring scholarly pursuits. But against his will, Hu Fei knew he was caught up in it. He could no longer remain on the sidelines. His clan's reason for having him participate in this martial arts tournament was likely this. If he continued to shrink back, it could very well implicate his clan. Hu Fei's thinking had matured considerably. He understood that only by becoming strong could he survive in this treacherous world of martial arts. Within the Luo Web's territory, the people of Heavenly Sword Manor were cleaning up the aftermath. They had been searching for their young master for a long time without any trace, anxiously wondering what to do. Everyone rejoiced at the young master's sudden return. Second Elder Lu hurried forward to ask if he was all right. He seemed a little embarrassed. Then, noticing Hu Fei's exasperated expression, he took out a letter and handed it to Second Elder Lu, instructing him to deliver it to the Bai family. Inside, it detailed how the Green Sword sect and the Spiderweb conspired to assassinate the second master of the Bai family, leaving the rest to them to handle. After that, he handed him a stack of banknotes, saying it was the spoils from the Spiderweb's leader. The disciples gaped at the banknotes. They had never seen so much money in their lives. Hu Fei contemplated how to divide the money. These subordinates were all on their first mission with him. He instructed, divide it equally among everyone. The disciples couldn't believe their ears. Hu Fei reasoned that without their help, he wouldn't have acquired this silver, so they deserved their share. The disciples stared blankly at the silver, thinking they wouldn't earn this much even in 10 years. Suddenly, they heard their young master shout from ahead, "What are you standing around for? We still have a journey ahead of us. Aren't we going to the martial arts conference?" Hearing this, everyone cheered and ran forward, each vowing to follow him to the death. Hu Fei was taken aback by their enthusiasm and hurriedly told them to exchange the large silver notes for smaller ones to distribute. Not long after, everyone finished dividing the silver and set off together for the martial arts convention. At this moment, everyone wore a happy expression, and Hu Fei was also infected by their joy. Although he came from the Heavenly Sword Manor and had never been restricted by money since childhood, that was his parents' money. This money, however, was earned by his own hands, so the feeling was naturally different. Looking at the group swaggering around, acting like newly rich peasants, Hu Fei suddenly looked at them. "What are you doing? Are you all sick? Don't act like that in front of me. Without 300 taels of silver, who dares to speak up around here?" Everyone hastily nodded at his words, awkwardly placing their hands behind their backs. Just like newly graduated bloggers who show off their bank balances everywhere they go. 3 days later, they were on their way to the martial arts conference. Hu Fei was still flying ahead, and everyone struggled to keep up. By now, they were nearing Jizhou. Second Elder Lu wanted to discuss with the young master about stopping for food and rest before continuing. But the young master was already far ahead, so he could only sigh helplessly. Hu Fei, who was encouraging them to enjoy the moment and breathe in the spiritual energy of the mountains and forests, suddenly stopped. Everyone who was chasing after him stopped abruptly and heard the young master say that Shaolin Temple on Mount Song was just ahead, and they might as well go visit. However, Hu Fei didn't know that this casual action would lead him to a fateful encounter. Upon hearing this, Lu Lauer hesitated, worried about missing the martial arts convention. Hu Fei wasn't interested in the convention. To him, it was just a headache-inducing gathering of feuding sections. He'd rather be traveling and enjoying the scenery. To find a plausible excuse, Hu Fei started fabricating a story. "Let's go to the temple to pray for blessings," he said. "We'll light incense for Tianjin Villa and pray for peace and unity in the martial arts world." Everyone happily agreed. They all thought the young master was truly virtuous and would surely lead their sect to greater heights in the future. As they gradually approached the temple, wooden towers began to appear one after another. Everyone was awestruck by the sight before them. This tower complex was the burial ground for generations of Shaolin monks, primarily used to distinguish the ranks of the deceased monks. The size of each tower depended on their Buddhist dharma and meritorious deeds during their lifetime. At this point, everyone was drawn in by a rich, enticing aroma. They guessed it was clearly the smell of meat. But this was Shaolin Temple, how could there be the smell of meat? Everyone hurriedly searched, but found nothing. The foolish deputy chief wondered if it was ghosts in the pagoda feasting. But Hu Fei noticed a figure at the foot of the pagoda. Someone was holding a wine gourd and drinking heartily. The smell of meat, Hu Fei, and the smell of meat seemed to resonate. His gaze immediately went in that direction. This little Hu Fei, within the pagoda grounds of Shaolin Temple. I saw someone enjoying a drink. This person held a chicken leg in their left hand and a wine gourd in their right. Sitting atop a wooden tower, enjoying the cool breeze, a meat-eating monk. Hu Fei was about to announce to everyone that he had found the source of the fragrance, when the person suddenly vanished, leaving only a single blade of grass. Hu Fei was bewildered by this sight, unable to believe his eyes. He guessed this person must be behind the wooden tower, otherwise, how could they disappear so quickly? Hu Fei tried using his heavenly eye to search for the vanished person. As my sky eye's range expanded, sure enough, he was behind the wooden tower, drinking. But the moment I saw him, the meat-eating monk realized he was being watched. In the blink of an eye, he vanished. I stared blankly at the empty tower, unable to believe what had just happened. Someone had actually sensed my sky eye and immediately evaded it. I suspected this mysterious meat-eating monk had likely awakened the sky eye skill as well, or he could sense the gaze of others. But why would a master of this level be sitting atop a wooden tower, drinking and eating meat? I was certain. He must be in the temple. He instructed everyone to go into the temple and burn incense. Soon, everyone arrived at the Shaolin Temple gates. Just then, a monk was walking towards them, so they stopped. The monk pressed his palms together and introduced himself as a Dharma protector of the Shaolin Temple, having met Hu Fei's grandfather at a banquet. However, Hu Fei was preoccupied with eating at the time and had completely forgotten about this Dharma protector. Seeing that Hu Fei didn't remember him, the Dharma protector just smiled. After all, thousands of people attended the banquet that day, so it was normal not to remember. Therefore, when Hu Fei mentioned the meat-eating monk in the pagoda area, the Dharma protector hadn't heard of such a person. Hu Fei's direct question made the Dharma protector suspicious. I guessed Hu Fei was talking about that strange monk. Then he reluctantly admitted there was such a person, living in seclusion year-round in the pagoda area, and fond of eating meat, so the Shaolin disciples called him the eccentric monk. Speaking of this, the protector no longer concealed anything and slowly recounted how Monk Yun Jinha was originally a remarkably talented Shaolin disciple, but due to an unfortunate accident, he had to leave Shaolin. However, 50 years ago, he mysteriously returned and has lived in seclusion ever since. Hearing this, Hu Fei grew anxious and hurriedly asked where he could find this person. The abbot reluctantly said that Monk Yun Jin had spoken with him a few times, but he found his behavior odd and didn't know his whereabouts. Knowing that further inquiries would be futile, Hu Fei bid farewell to the abbot, intending to search on his own. He guessed that this person's movements were secretive, and he could only search everywhere. He had originally planned to follow the meat-eating monk to learn from him, but now he could only approach him slowly. The monk had avoided people many times, likely not wanting to be seen, so he told everyone he wanted to go alone. Lu Laoer was the first to object to the young master's plan, advising him to stay with the group. Hu Fei helplessly reassured them, saying that this was Shaolin Temple and there wouldn't be any danger, and told them to wait there before turning to leave. He left behind a group of helpless people. The deputy captain muttered, "I hope the young master doesn't cause any more trouble." Half a day later, Hu Fei arrived at the back mountain of Shaolin Temple. Shaolin Temple is the holy land of Central Plains Buddhism, and it's difficult to buy meat here, so this monk Yun Jin couldn't have bought meat nearby. That leaves only one possibility: he's hunting in the forest. Thinking this, Hu Fei went to the back mountain to search for clues, looking carefully. He heard a rustling sound. Guessing it was a fox, he followed the sound. He saw a fox cowering in the grass, stared at by Monk Yunjin. Monk Yunjin suddenly grabbed its prey, twisted it slightly, and the poor fox instantly lost its meal. Hu Fei was astonished watching Monk Yunjin's actions, but then thought Monk Yunjin hadn't actually killed anything. But where did his wine come from? Driven by curiosity, Hu Fei secretly followed him. Moments later, Monk Yunjin arrived at a shallow cave. Inside, it was full of wine he had brewed himself. He took out a wine gourd and leaned against a wine jar, then suddenly vanished. The monk placed a rabbit and a wine jar down, then channeled his inner energy. In a flash, his hands burst into flames. He slowly approached the wine jar, using the flames in his palms to distill it. Seeing this, Hu Fei finally understood how the monk had survived in the pagoda. But why was he living near this tower? While I was thinking, I heard the monk say, "Hey, brat, get out here." Hearing the monk say that, Hu Fei didn't hide anymore, though his way of addressing him was a little unpleasant. Monk Yunjin questioned Hu Fei about whether he had been spying on him at the tower. Hearing this, I quickly clasped my hands in apology, admitting my mistake, and introduced myself as being from Heavenly Sword Manor. Monk Yunjin interrupted me, saying he didn't care about this so-called Heavenly Sword Manor, and anyone who disturbed his meal was an enemy. I was taken aback by his abrupt words. But before I could say anything, then, Yun Kim's eyes suddenly widened, as if he had discovered something unbelievable. He suddenly stood up, staring at Hu Fei. So young, yet already at this realm. Interesting. He himself had only awakened his celestial eye in his 50s. The younger generation is truly remarkable, he couldn't help but sigh. Hearing his praise, Hu Fei felt a little embarrassed, and even more surprised that the monk had seen through his strength with just a glance. But then he suddenly asked if Hu Fei wanted to steal his wine. Before Hu Fei could ask why a monk could eat meat and drink alcohol, he suddenly scolded, "You little rascal, no need to peek at me. I know you have extraordinary talent. Do you want?" At this point, he suddenly vanished. Hu Fei hurried after him, wanting to get to the bottom of how he knew about his heavenly eye, and why this cultivation technique appeared within him. He saw Yunjin acting as if possessed, running and shouting, "Heavenly Sword Manor. 5 great monsters, master." Hu Fei listened to his rambling, completely bewildered, and ran ahead to ask him what he was talking about and how he knew his secret. Hearing Hu Fei's question, he angrily replied that it was his own secret, and he couldn't reveal it. Then he scolded, "You little rascal, you dare question me?" Mid-scolding, Master Yunjin suddenly grabbed a tree trunk, using its momentum to spin and engage Hu Fei in combat. Not understanding what was happening, he prepared to fight back, his inner energy suddenly condensing, directed straight at Hu Fei's pressure point. In the blink of an eye, the palm imbued with powerful inner energy struck. Seeing he couldn't dodge, Hu Fei roared loudly and met the attack head-on. He had anticipated his opponent's internal strength was superior to his own, but upon contact, he was still startled. His opponent's power was truly formidable, even surpassing his father's. He had to exert all his strength to withstand it. Seeing him withstand his palm strike, the Golden Arhat monk was greatly surprised. In his 40 years within this tower, he had never encountered someone with such natural talent. As he increased his strength, he began to struggle, and the monk's expression changed. The monk intended to use his overwhelming internal force to shatter his chi. As time passed, fear appeared on his face, his meridians gradually being suppressed. Once the monk's power invaded his body, he would be completely paralyzed, and everything he had pursued would vanish like smoke. Thinking of this, Hu Fei suddenly focused all his internal energy, preparing to fight it out with Monk Yunjin. The situation suddenly became tense. Monk Yunjin also realized at this moment that although he had used 50% of his power, this kid in front of him was actually able to withstand it. He had originally intended to dissipate the boy's internal energy, but unexpectedly, the youngster's inner strength was so powerful. At this point, Hu Fei found it increasingly difficult to resist. But then he saw the monk raise his other hand, golden internal energy condensing in his palm. In the blink of an eye, it struck Hu Fei. In that instant, a look of pain flashed across Hu Fei's face. He suddenly felt the strength in his body restrained, as if something was shattering. Seeing the monk's fierce expression, he knew the monk intended to use a vicious move. But in this close combat situation, it was difficult for him to dodge. With the golden symbol monk's shout, Hu Fei flew backward like a kite with a broken string, rolling across the ground for dozens of meters before coming to a stop. Before he could get up, he vomited blood. Looking at Hu Fei lying on the ground, the venerable seemed to go mad. Even if heaven has granted you this special physique, destroying it is more interesting to me. Having said that, Venerable Yunjin slowly pulled out the wine gourd from his back, taking a small sip, as if he had just completed a momentous task.
After all, it cost me half of my cultivation to remove the impurities from this little bastard's body.
Such an enviable physique. I couldn't not use some real skill. He also marveled at the truly admirable physique.
Thinking this, he turned to leave, remembering his roasted rabbit. Meanwhile, the unconscious Hu Fei radiated a violent energy. The internal force the abbot forcibly instilled within me is coursing through my body, making my blood boil. Mouthfuls of black blood gushed out. Immediately after, the meridians in my body felt like they were being violently struck, emitting popping sounds.
After a series of convulsions, I lay still and motionless like a log.
But I didn't know yet that purging the impurities from my body was only the first step for Abbot Yunjin.
What would follow would be even more painful. Sometime later, I suddenly awoke, letting out a relieved sigh. I realized I was lying in bed. I dazedly recalled what had happened. I was clearly almost beaten to death by that monk, yet here I am, safe and sound in bed. Seeing young master awake, second Uncle Lu and the deputy captain were overjoyed and hurriedly asked how I was feeling. I felt light and comfortable all over. I looked at them blankly, asking what had happened. Second Uncle Lu quickly explained that after returning and seeing I hadn't, they organized a search party. They found me lying in the forest. After being treated by a Shaolin protector, they discovered I was unharmed. On the contrary, my vital energy was stable and my internal force was even purer. Hearing this, I suddenly smelled something foul. They looked down and saw the smell was coming from me. I asked Second Uncle Lu why they hadn't changed my clothes. Second Uncle Lu said they had changed them several times, but a black fluid kept seeping from my body. The vice captain stepped forward to explain. The Dharma protector said these were impurities expelled from the young master's body, and they would gradually disappear. Hu Fei finally understood. Before he fell unconscious, he had fought with the Cloud Golden Monk, and the impurities must have been purged during the fight. Looking at his body covered in foul-smelling sweat, Hu Fei lamented his recent bad luck and decided he needed a good bath. The abbot of Shaolin Temple came to Hu Fei and said he and the Cloud Golden Monk were destined to meet, and that he could stay for a few more days, perhaps a new opportunity would arise. Hu Fei understood the Dharma protector's meaning. If he could truly learn something, he was very willing to stay. So he clasped his hands and thanked the Dharma protector. He would stay a while longer. Hu Fei arrived at Shaolin's back mountain. It must be fate. I should ask Master Yunjin for clarification. Did that monk do that? To test me, or was it intentional? While I was searching, I suddenly heard a voice ask from behind, "You're still alive?" Hu Fei turned around to look. It was indeed the meat-eating monk, who seemed somewhat surprised. Hu Fei cupped his hands in greeting, but saw Master Yunjin roll up his sleeves, wanting to fight him. Hu Fei, intending to practice, was taken aback by this unexpected situation, but politely replied, "I hail from the Heavenly Sword Manor, and the techniques I've learned are all swordplay." Monk Yunjin scolded, "Every practitioner has their own specialty. But what if one is attacked while sleeping? What if one is attacked while eating? Therefore, a true expert must know how to fight unarmed." Hu Fei was left speechless by his words. While he was pondering, he saw the monk suddenly tell him to drop his sword. Hu Fei could only throw his sword down, still thinking about how to deal with this man. Before he could react, a powerful punch landed squarely on Hu Fei's face. Caught off guard by the monk's sudden attack, Hu Fei was unable to defend himself, and tumbled to the ground. Hu Fei cried out in pain, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. He only knew he'd been punched, unaware that his opponent's move was the world-renowned Diamond Fist, far different from ordinary techniques. And with Monk Yunjin's robust physique and profound inner strength, his execution of the technique was even more powerful than the standard Diamond Fist. Hu Fei had just gotten to his feet to speak when the monk attacked again. Seeing him charge straight towards him, Hu Fei hastily raised his hand to block, but he was knocked to the ground with a single palm strike. The whole process happened in the blink of an eye. Hu Fei was knocked to the ground again. Monk Yunjin scolded, "You didn't even try to resist when you were hit?" Hu Fei, now dazed from the blow, stammered, trying to beg for mercy. Before he could finish, the monk attacked again, beating Hu Fei until he cried out continuously. Yunjin was actually teaching him. Just like that, when he wakes up, Hu Fei will understand Abbot Golden Cloud's intentions. All night, Lao Lu and the deputy captain watched the young master being beaten black and blue. Worried, but not knowing what to do. The young master didn't want them to interfere, and ended up covered in injuries. Fortunately, the protector examined him and said it wasn't serious, so the two of them were relieved. The next day, Hu Fei suddenly woke up. He clearly remembered being beaten to a pulp by Abbot Golden Cloud yesterday, and now I can move freely again. The pain in my body feels washed away. My whole body is full of vitality. I can't believe what I've experienced. After being beaten, my strength has increased inexplicably. Thinking this, I hurried to the back mountain, wanting to get to the bottom of it.
Seeing the young master so lively, old Lu guessed he was going to find that monk again.
After finishing the incense offering, I stood there
and found Master Golden Cloud, whom I had been looking for. Before I could speak, Master Golden Cloud said he had something to do.
That time was running out.
Having said that, he took a stance, not giving me a chance to speak, and immediately began teaching me how to sense my own chi. Master Golden Cloud then revealed his attacking technique to me, saying the first step, when striking, is to start with the eyes. Where the eyes look is where the attack will go. Having said that, he immediately combined what he had just taught and attacked Hu Fei again. Hu Fei was caught off guard by his move, and staggered back a few steps before stopping. Then, Monk Golden Cloud told Hu Fei the second step was to observe the opponent's expression. Once you see a slight opening in your opponent, you can accurately predict their attack.
Haven't you awakened your heavenly eye? Why don't you use it to observe my movements?
Hu Fei, dazed from the blow, only then remembered his heavenly eye,
and opened it.
Within the heavenly eye, Monk Golden Cloud's movements were so clear that he could see every single one of them distinctly. Facing the oncoming Venerable Yunjin, Hu Fei changed,
dodging the punch in the blink of an eye.
He found it strange, the heavenly eye actually had such an effect. When he first awakened it, he used it to explore his surroundings. What a waste of heaven's gift. Seeing that Hu Fei's heavenly eye had fully awakened, Venerable Yunjin stopped transmitting his power. His fist techniques, like a phantom, bombarded Hu Fei frantically.
Looking at Hu Fei now,
facing Venerable Yunjin's ferociously attacking fist techniques, he didn't dare to underestimate him. He continuously relied on the advantage of the heavenly eye, dodging each wave of attacks. Only then did Hu Fei realize his opponent's fist technique could simultaneously attack different points, something an ordinary martial artist couldn't do. As he pondered this, Yunjin clenched his fists, vigorously accumulating spiritual power, strands of golden true chi swirling around them. In that instant, Hu Fei saw the fist technique imbued with a sharp, golden light. Although Hu Fei could barely dodge, the force of the blows still tore at his spiritual power. This monk was truly no ordinary person. Hu Fei could only respond with his full strength. He used his limbs to sense his opponent's attacks, trying to adapt to that overbearing spiritual power. This one-sided assault continued until daybreak. Suddenly, Monk Golden Cloud reminded Hu Fei that he had 2 days left. Hearing this, Hu Fei asked in confusion what he was talking about. Golden Cloud didn't hide anything, saying that if Hu Fei were strong enough, he would tell him. After a sparring match, dawn had broken, and Hu Fei no longer had any difficulty dealing with Golden Cloud's fist techniques. Although he still got hit frequently, he could clearly hold his own. Monk Golden Cloud stopped at this point and told Hu Fei that his attack method wasn't a central planes fist technique, but a kind of combined palm strike. He said that if it could be applied well to swordsmanship, its power would be immense. He then handed Hu Fei a sword, saying he had a natural affinity for the sword, but his inner understanding of martial arts would prevent him from going astray. Although his life would be full of hardship, at the final moment, to have met someone as gifted as him, and to have guided him to become my successor, makes this life worthwhile. Saying this, Yunjin raised his staff. This was the final lesson he would teach Hu Fei. He instructed Hu Fei to take up his weapon, wanting to see the results of his training. Hu Fei didn't waste any words and immediately drew his sword. But in that instant, he froze. The sound of his sword being drawn was vastly different than before. Yunjin looked at the stunned Hu Fei and angrily scolded, "You little rascal! Didn't I tell you? A true martial arts supreme, in the moment they draw their sword, will have a fundamental difference compared to ordinary martial artists." Saying this, he stepped in front of Hu Fei. "The fist techniques you've learned must be integrated with your swordsmanship. If you simply strengthen your body, but cannot combine the results of this training, then this learning will be useless. Treat your swordsmanship as an effective fist technique." Master Yunjin finished speaking and stood up straight. In an instant, he attacked Hu Fei, startling him, and he immediately dodged. Seeing that Hu Fei didn't draw his sword, he angrily questioned him why he didn't use his sword to attack. Hu Fei then reacted, understanding Master Yunjin's meaning. Thinking of this, he gripped his sword tightly. The final day of training begins. Before his eyes, the monk, like a bee, performs the unpredictable Shaolin staff technique, forcing him to give up. 50 years ago, he suddenly returned and has resided there ever since. As if by divine arrangement, in the final moments of his life, he met the extraordinarily gifted Hu Fei. Even someone as eccentric as he was, upon seeing Hu Fei's growth, felt. But this also aligned with his choice. After all, this would be his final time teaching. Hu Fei gripped his sword, the relentless training instructions of Monk Yunjin echoing in his ears. How to meld swordsmanship with himself, integrating it with the fist techniques he had learned. Hu Fei parried Yunjin's attacks while pondering the techniques his mentor taught. Perhaps, the unity of man and sword was the key to breaking through the barrier between martial arts and swordsmanship. I should heed Yunjin's teachings and try to understand these principles. Use the sword to forge my own path. When the sword and I become one, the wall separating the two will crumble. As Hu Fei grasped this realization, his swordsmanship became more fluid. In the blink of an eye, during their exchange, Yunjin felt a powerful pressure. He understood that this little rascal in front of him had finally grasped his teachings. At first, he had worried whether Hu Fei could keep up with his training, but now it seemed he had worried for nothing. He couldn't help but sigh, lamenting how many years he had wasted in his life. If he had trained as diligently, he certainly wouldn't have lived his life in vain. Although Hu Fei was a natural martial arts prodigy, his growth rate still shocked him. Soon, the martial arts world would be shaken by him once more. Thinking of this, he swung the staff in his hand like a whirlwind. In the blink of an eye, he leaped up, only to see Hu Fei attacking him. Suddenly, Monk Wenjin attacked him like a frenzied ghost. Hu Fei was a bit flustered at this moment. Although he had grasped the concept of man and sword as one, the monk's staff attacks were as dense as a downpour, covering the sky and earth. Before he could think, the staff was already in front of him. Hu Fei hurriedly parried with his sword. Facing Monk Wenjin's moves, he was still at a disadvantage. In a martial arts duel, quickly gaining the upper hand is paramount. At this point, Hu Fei no longer held back. He immediately channeled his inner energy, using all his strength to repel Yunjin's attack. Who knew this technique would be like water off a duck's back? He countered my attack with relentless and powerful blows. Just as I was struggling, he suddenly shouted, "You must overcome all obstacles to achieve greatness in martial arts. Before you stands a wall. If you cannot overcome it, you will fall into the abyss. This is like a game, a confrontation with the demon within your heart. The higher your skill, the harder this demonic wall is to break. You must become the one who shatters it. Overcome this wall, and you can soon escape the shackles within your heart." Hu Fei still didn't understand Yunjin's meaning. So I'm still giving it my all, not daring to slack off in the slightest. However, in the heavenly eye state, I see demons coiling around Hu Fei. This must be the demonic wall Yunjin mentioned. Each demon, as if from hell itself, lunges towards him. Hu Fei already knows the gravity of the situation. Only by giving his all and desperately fighting through this predicament does he have a sliver of hope for survival. When he uses his heavenly eye to look at Yunjin again, he's once again stunned. Because before him isn't the expressionless Yunjin, but a monstrous beast, like a wrathful god of death, was about to devour him. Hu Fei was stunned by this sight, completely forgetting his current predicament. His mind went blank. Suddenly, a voice slowly echoed within his sea of consciousness. Where the heart goes, the chi gathers, then both the heart and spirit soar to that place. This voice came from within his own sea of consciousness. Immediately after, he clenched his fists. "I will break through your demonic wall. In this life, I will never be trapped." Immediately after, spiritual energy filled my body, and the treasured sword in my hand, as if sensing my will, slashed towards those demons. As my spiritual power surged, the demons before me were cut to pieces. Although the enemy was numerous, in the blink of an eye, they vanished into thin air. Faced with this sudden turn of events, Monk Lunjin couldn't help but be astonished. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The treasured sword in my hand had dispelled his demonic aura. In this battle, I was now Yunjin's equal. This venerable monk was extremely satisfied with Hu Fei's performance. He had resolved. Hu Fei seemed somewhat relieved as he said, "We've been fighting for 2 days, can we eat now?" Monk Golden Cloud sternly told him, "You still have one last thing to do." Having said that, he vanished from the spot, suddenly appearing above Hu Fei's head. Hu Fei was still dazed, completely unaware of what the monk was saying. Monk Golden Cloud exerted his full strength, a surge of violent golden internal energy erupted from his body, frantically pouring into Hu Fei. Even a fool could see Yunjin was transferring his energy. Hu Fei hurriedly shouted for him to stop. Once the transfer was complete, Yunjin would lose all his internal energy, putting his life in danger. But Yunjin ignored Hu Fei's warning, shouting, "You little rascal, kneel down and accept my inheritance. Listen carefully to what I say next." Suddenly, the monk exerted all his strength, and in an instant, the golden light around him intensified. A surge of golden energy flowed continuously into Hu Fei's dantian. However, things weren't as simple as Hu Fei imagined. Transferring energy wasn't just about passing on cultivation, but also about altering destiny. This extreme reaction, for the one transferring the energy, at best, would cause decades of weakness in a short period. In severe cases, one's appearance changes in the blink of an eye, and life slips away. Nearly an hour later, Venerable Yunjin's transmission of power ended. As he collapsed, he clearly felt his body weaken and grow dizzy.
Looking at the little rascal before him absorbing the cultivation power, he couldn't help but sigh. Being able to fulfill his wish before death was a comfort. Lost in thought, Yun Jin's appearance quietly changed, but he didn't notice. He only hoped that this Hu Fei would help Shaolin if they ever faced danger. But who could foresee this outcome? Perhaps it's all destiny. If I hadn't been so arrogant back then, perhaps I wouldn't have killed my fellow disciple. To atone for my past sins, I, Yun Jin, left Shaolin. I secluded myself in a cave for 50 years. However, just as I was about to achieve enlightenment, the regret in my heart manifested as a demon. I couldn't escape it, nor could I forget. After a long struggle, I finally decided to abandon my cultivation. But it was also because I was forced to compromise with the demon. We made a pact. If I could abandon my cultivation and seal myself away for half my life, the demon wouldn't appear. 20 years later, it would return. This is why I am called the Sealed Monk. Today, the 20 years have passed. That is why I taught Hu Fei for the last 3 days of my life. I passed on my lifelong cultivation to him. However, my life is now nearing its end. Before being controlled by the heart demon, he had to find a cave to bury himself. To avoid being controlled by the heart demon, with this thought, he shook his body and leaped towards the mountain peaks. A moment later, Monk Yun Jin arrived at a cliff face. He combined the last of his remaining power with his life force, unleashing them simultaneously. He struck forward with all his might. This was the purpose he had left for himself. Following the resounding boom, he jumped into the enormous fissure. At this time, Hu Fei had finished absorbing Monk Yun Jin's inheritance. Hearing the loud explosion coming from afar, Hu Fei knew he had left. If fate allowed, he hoped they would meet again in the next life. From the beginning, when Monk Yun Jin trained his body, opened his celestial eye, and then influenced his mind, he had shown Hu Fei nothing but kindness. Although they had only known each other for 3 days, in Hu Fei's heart, he was already his master. Then, he bowed 3 times towards the cave, considering it a formal apprenticeship, and left. Second Uncle Lu and the deputy captain had been waiting near the pagoda forest for 2 years. Seeing the young master return safe and sound, everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief. Before anyone could speak, Hu Fei urged them to quickly prepare food. Upon returning to the inn, Hu Fei immediately began to eat. Seeing the young master devour his food like a starving wolf, second Uncle Lu hastily asked what had happened. Hu Fei didn't hide anything, just urged second brother Lu to eat quickly. A few days later, they arrived in Wuhan, the location of the martial arts convention. There were clearly more people on the road. Hu Fei looked around curiously. Although he spent some time at Shaolin Temple, he finally made it. There's still some time before the martial arts convention. Let's find an inn here to rest and then set off again. Having said that, a moment later they arrived at an inn, and the waiter hurried out to greet them. As the convention drew near, the place had clearly become bustling, and the inn was almost full. The waiter told everyone it was a bit crowded and they might have to wait. Understanding, second Master Lu took out a silver ingot and asked the waiter to make arrangements. The waiter was indeed quick-witted. He arranged for them to share a table with other guests. After they sat down, Hu Fei thanked the others for being willing to share the table with them. Seeing Hu Fei's politeness, the middle-aged man across from him spoke up, saying there was no need to be so formal. The martial arts conference was about to begin, and sharing tables in Wuhan had become a custom. It was fate that brought them together. He introduced himself as Hu Jin. Second Master Lu then clasped his hands and said they were from the Heavenly Sword Manor and had also come to Wuhan for the martial arts conference. This young master is the young lord of their mountain manor, named Hu Fei. Hearing this, the guest opposite him couldn't help but think, Hu Fei, why does that name sound so familiar? The guest beside him suddenly remembered, isn't he the young lord of the Heavenly Sword Manor, the one known as the threefold sword technique? Hearing everyone address him this way, Hu Fei was curious and asked them why threefold. It turned out he had once used an unusual method to execute his family's sword technique, so that's what people in the martial arts world called him. Hu Fei was stunned after hearing this. The threefold sword technique was just the most basic method in the manor. He didn't expect to be so famous, and this nickname didn't sound very good. However, the waiter standing nearby was a little surprised. So they were from the Heavenly Sword Manor, then wouldn't the young lady from earlier be? Suddenly, the waiter rushed in and reported, across the street, a maid is being bullied. She claims to be from the Heavenly Sword clan. Do you want to go and have a look? Hearing this, Hu Fei was surprised because everyone from Heavenly Sword Manor was present. But for safety's sake, he asked the waiter to lead the way. The waiter then recounted the whole story. After listening, Hu Fei became a little worried. According to the waiter, an ordinary maid wouldn't dare to falsely claim to be from Heavenly Sword Manor. He quickly followed the waiter, along with everyone else, to the scene. As they approached, they heard the loud sounds of an argument. They saw a fierce martial artist saying to the red-faced maid across from him, "You spilled a cup of tea, you need to compensate me with 1 tael of silver, or I will take you home to be my maid." Look closely at this pitiful maid, isn't she my maid? Hu Fei looked at the scene before him in confusion, unable to believe he would meet her here. However, before he could react, the martial artist continued to aggressively threaten the maid for compensation. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, young Hu Fei appeared behind everyone, channeling his internal energy. Before anyone understood what was happening, the 2 closest men were sent flying, crashing heavily into the opposite table, stunning everyone present. After recovering, the martial artist hastily called for backup. At this moment, Hu Fei's hands were enveloped in a golden light as he quickly channeled his inner energy. Before his chest, a series of afterimages appeared from his 2 palms. Looking closely, there were 12 different techniques. In the blink of an eye, the 6 harmony palms struck. This scene astonished second elder Lu, who was watching. He had never seen the young master practice this type of palm technique. He was able to execute 12 different techniques in an instant. It seemed that even the sword techniques of the heavenly sword manner didn't have this kind of inheritance. Everyone was shocked by the young master's palm technique. Seeing this, the leading martial artist still pointed aggressively at him, cursing incessantly. Hu Fei spun around and arrived in front of this dandy. Before he could speak, the martial artist felt himself locked in place. Just as he was struck with terror, Hu Fei leaped into the air, landing a kick to his face. Accompanied by the opponent's scream, he was slammed against the wall. After things calmed down, Hu Fei quickly asked the maid if she was hurt. The frightened maid, feeling the warmth of her young master's concern, threw herself into Hu Fei's arms. Flustered by this action, Hu Fei quickly comforted her. "It's all over now." The onlookers frowned at the scene. What's wrong with this little girl? Shouldn't she be at the manor? Why is she here? After comforting the maid, everyone prepared to leave. Hu Fei then took out a silver ingot and gave it to the waiter. Could this familiar gesture really have been thought up by a 10-year-old? Everyone returned to the inn. Hu Fei sat there with a serious expression and asked the maid why she was there. The maid said she was the young master's servant girl and, worried that he would encounter misfortune while attending the martial arts conference, had traveled a long distance to get here. Hu Fei wasn't sure whether to scold her or praise her for what she'd done. Everyone, hearing the maid's words, praised her loyalty and dedication. Hu Fei felt exasperated but could only let the maid stay by his side. He decided he would have to scold her when they returned. However, he also knew how hard the journey had been for her. So he only reprimanded her briefly before telling everyone to return to their rooms to rest. Nothing else happened, although today had truly been unexpected. The next day, as soon as dawn broke, the streets were already bustling with people. The lively cries of street vendors woke Hu Fei. He stared blankly at the bustling scene outside the window. So much had happened this year. The life he'd lived was something the young masters of other martial arts families couldn't even imagine. Ever since coming into contact with that strange book, not only had his body changed, but he had also awakened his heavenly eye. On his way to the martial arts conference, he was pursued by the Luo Web. Later, while passing by Shaolin, he received instruction from the venerable Yin Jin, who even imparted 50 years of cultivation to him. Perhaps all of this was Hu Fei's destiny. If Shaolin were to face danger, he would certainly lend a hand. More importantly, Shaolin's presence in the north was crucial. If it were to fall into peril, the other clans will also be implicated. I just hope these hands won't become weapons for killing, but I have to protect my own life first. Hu Fei has matured a lot after this journey. The road ahead is still long. I hope he can maintain his integrity. It was originally the demonic cult's century-old 7-colored mineral. They relied on its power to win hundreds of battles, big and small. But during the Great Martial Arts War 50 years ago, they were defeated by the Central Plains martial artists. Before that, they used a secret technique to seal their souls into their mineral. That battle nearly annihilated the demonic cult. The 9 great sects also nearly lost all their fighting strength, ultimately achieving a Pyrrhic victory. That year, the Ouyang clan, one of the demonic cult's 8 great protectors, fled to a small village near the border of the Great Wall after their defeat in the Great Battle. However, 300 years later, under the leadership of Ouyang Qi, relying on their ancestral martial arts and the wealth accumulated over generations, they became the most powerful clan in the kingdom. But how long can this peace, bought with their lives, last? Today, a group of people of unknown origin suddenly appeared before the gates of the Ouyang clan. The disciples guarding the gate were flustered by this scene. The Ouyang family was a renowned martial arts family. So why would someone come to cause trouble? Seeing the other party's hostile intentions, they quickly sent someone to report. The fierce-looking leader threw a red letter, specifically instructing them to deliver it to the Ouyang family head. Seeing this, Hu Fei knew that the matter was serious and hurried to report to the Ouyang family head. Later, upon seeing the red letter with gold patterns, the Ouyang family head became worried. Judging by the letter's appearance, if he wasn't mistaken, it must be a secret letter from the Shounen sect. His ancestors had indeed instructed that if such a letter ever appeared, they must obey its instructions, regardless of life or death. Hearing this, everyone below was in an uproar. Who would want to obey a 300-year-old promise? Ouyang Tri also thought the same. His current life wasn't bad. Following the Protagonist sect for a far-fetched promise would probably bring more harm than good. He decided to ignore these people. After saying that, he turned and left. From afar, he saw a group of people in black clothes standing at the door. A moment later, the disciples gathered. The fierce-looking leader told them to clear the way. The young master smiled and said, "This is my welcome gift for you all." At this moment, the Dharma Protector beside him also spoke up. Surely the other 8 Dharma Protector clans are the same. He charged into the crowd as he spoke. Might as well kill a few of them. It'll save the other clans some effort. With a single stride, he burst into the midst of the disciples, sending the fierce-faced leader flying with a palm strike. Before the other disciples could react, he followed up with a kick, scattering them. By now, the other Dharma Protectors had arrived, and they all began to circulate their chi, launching their attacks. They swept away the remaining underlings. Seeing that their opponents were far stronger than them, the remaining disciples began to panic. The Protector watched coldly, but made no move to intervene. Suddenly, an authoritative voice rang out. Hearing the voice, everyone knew the Ouyang clan leader had arrived and restrained their auras. The Ouyang clan leader, holding a long saber, asked if they were from the Protagonist sect. Who else could emit such powerful true chi, besides their sect leader? The young sect master smiled and said, "No need to guess, I am Bei Tianma, greetings to the Ouyang clan leader." This simple sentence shocked the Ouyang clan leader. This young man was from the Bei Tian clan. Bei Tian Lai, whose name once made people tremble, killed countless experts back then. And he still dares to call himself Bei Tian. Isn't he afraid of being hunted down by the Central Plains martial arts world? However, the Ouyang family head was unaware that a tragedy was silently approaching. The prestigious Ouyang family, the most powerful in the Northern Yin Kingdom, would be utterly destroyed because of this kid's words. 300 years ago, during the Great Martial Arts War, following the collapse of the demonic cult, the Ouyang family, one of the demonic cult's 8 Dharma Protectors, fled to the Great Wall. Although they possessed ancestral martial arts and wealth accumulated over generations, still terrified by Bei Tianma's words. But at this point, the Ouyang patriarch couldn't risk his entire clan any longer. Faced with Bei Tianma's interrogation, he still refused to compromise, unwilling to let his clan fall into another bloodbath. Seeing this, the Shounen sect's young sect master, knowing the situation was beyond saving, drew his sword, the Fulu sword. In the young master's eyes, it was truly laughable. On the verge of death, they still shed tears. All the wealth and power accumulated over the years. With that, he unleashed his true chi. Facing the sect master's pressure, the Ouyang clan struggled to resist. This violent true chi and the Fulu sword in his hand, could they truly have been passed down by Bei Tian Lai? Before anyone could ponder further, the young sect master launched his attack. Patriarch Ouyang, already prepared, felt a pang in his heart. He had long anticipated this day, so he never neglected his martial arts training and always led everyone in diligent practice, which resulted in their current formidable strength. Yet, unexpectedly, they couldn't withstand a single blow from this young master. The opponent's calm and arrogant gaze suggested this massacre was merely a game to him. It seemed the Ouyang clan would hardly escape this calamity today. Thinking this, he gritted his teeth in determination. He gripped his treasured sword tightly, his stance prompting the young master to ask, "Do you still value riches over your life?" Patriarch Ouyang sneered, "Better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Even if today is the end of my Ouyang clan, I have no regrets and no resentment. 100 years from now, my descendants will remember they are the offspring of the Ouyang clan, not the Protagonist sect." Hearing this, Bei Tianma became even more delighted. "So what? You won't live much longer anyway." Upon hearing this, the Ouyang clan leader immediately stood up. Silence fell instantly. As his chi circulated, all the sword chi converged onto his blade, slashing towards Bei Tianma's head. But at the very last moment, the young master swayed, effortlessly dodging the attack. Then, 3 sounds, swoosh, came from Ouyang Chi's body, seemingly out of nowhere. After everything quieted down, the Ouyang clan lay scattered on the ground. Bei Tianma looked at the corpses on the ground, a hint of regret in his heart. What a pity, such lifelong martial arts skill, yet they couldn't die by my hand. Then he ordered, "Kill them all. Leave no one alive." The guardians, receiving the order, immediately charged forward. Amidst the tragic screams, the entire Ouyang family was turned into a bloodbath. As the sun set in the west, the century-old Ouyang family was thus burned to ashes in a sea of flames. Guided by Hu Fei, everyone from Heavenly Sword Manor arrived at the martial arts conference. faced with the bustling and lively martial arts scene. Hu Fei was also stunned by the sight. Afterwards, everyone entered the inn. After giving his name, Second Master Lu requested a top-tier room. The old man calmly asked if they had a hero's invitation. If not, he would have to make other arrangements. At this moment, Hu Fei took out the invitation from his chest and handed it to the old man. Heaven Sword Manor, young master, Hu Fei. Reading this, the old man exclaimed in surprise. Then, holding the invitation with trembling hands, he asked Hu Fei, "Could you be the creator of the threefold sword technique?" Before Hu Fei could answer, the old man announced to those around him, "This is the creator of the famed threefold sword technique." Hu Fei was stunned by this reaction, never expecting the sword technique he had casually created to be so exaggeratedly praised. After they finished registering and arranging for all their attendants, the old man hurriedly sent someone to lead them to the exquisite pavilion in the central area. Then, guided by a disciple, they went inside. Shortly afterward, they arrived at a magnificent building. After looking around, everyone was amazed by the elaborately arranged and exquisite gardens. However, at this moment, someone approached them. This handsome young man introduced himself as being from the Morong family, a clandestine intelligence agency, similar to the Imperial Court's Langya Guard. Seeing the other man's politeness, Hu Fei also introduced himself. It's just that when I heard the words Mount Heaven Sword Manor and Hu Fei, I became a little suspicious. Isn't he just a kid with triple-layered swordsmanship? Suddenly, Hu Fei asked a strange question. Does the Morong family all use carrier pigeons? Young Hu Fei was quite astonished and hurriedly asked him how he knew. Hu Fei didn't hide anything, saying that when he saw the pigeon loft and saw a pile of old letters in the mailbox, but not a single pigeon, that's how he guessed. Morong Yi was stunned by Hu Fei's deduction, but Hu Fei continued to ask, "Did you break your sword while practicing this morning?" Another sharp question. This time, Morong Yi couldn't remain calm. However, Hu Fei continued, "Because when I shook your hand, the thumb on your right hand also unconsciously trembled. You must be a sword lover, otherwise, you wouldn't have reacted that way. Judging from the dark circles under your eyes, I can guess that you haven't had breakfast, which is why your power is unstable. I'm guessing you're upset about breaking your sword, so you weren't in the mood for breakfast." Is this kid a monster? Just from a handshake, this 9-year-old child was able to deduce everything that happened. From an unintentional small gesture of the other person and the dark circles under their eyes, he correctly judged the reason for the unstable power was due to skipping breakfast. Luckily, it broke this morning. Otherwise, I would have accidentally broken my precious sword. Hearing this line of reasoning, young Hu Fei, who stood before him, laughed heartily and clapped his hands, saying, "You've seen right through me." He thought to himself, this child is not as the rumors say. He's a genius. Thinking of this, Morong Yi sincerely invited Hu Fei to join his intelligence agency and hoped Hu Fei would take on the role of chief secretary. Hu Fei was caught off guard by this unexpected situation. He came to the martial arts conference mainly to observe and understand the situation in the martial arts world. This situation suited his interests. After a moment, Hu Fei made a few simple requests. First, he hoped to bring his friends along. Second, he wanted to become a high-ranking leader with access to intelligence reports. As an intelligence agency, it naturally had to gather all kinds of information, and it would be even more convenient to use his own people. Morong Yi found this increasingly interesting and, greatly anticipating Hu Fei's next move, agreed to his request. Everyone was accustomed to the young master's extraordinary deductive abilities. The thought of working with him in the future filled them with joy. Hu Fei then arranged accommodations for everyone based on the number of people and their luggage. Hu Fei said that there was still some time before the martial arts conference began, so they might as well visit the Jinan branch. Therefore, after he announced himself as the newly appointed director of the intelligence agency, Morong Yi must have made arrangements. Hu Fei easily entered the intelligence agency's archives. Looking at the stacks of books, he was overjoyed. The first thing he needed to do was understand the current situation in the martial arts world. Fortunately, their materials were very organized, and he could look up the necessary information through the index. As if by divine arrangement, Hu Fei was deeply interested in the fate of the demonic sect after the Great War 300 years ago, and through the writings, he learned that the demonic sect had vanished after the war. Only in the last decade or so have they begun to show signs of activity, and moreover, someone has stepped forward to rally them. They seem to be gradually infiltrating the Central Plains martial arts world, biding their time. Hu Fei buried himself in the study every day, his mind filled with this unbelievable information. Indeed, those destined for greatness can endure solitude. A month later, Hu Fei had finished reading all the information in the archives. However, a casual remark he made was clearly overheard by two people who had just entered, and they could hardly believe their ears. He finished reading all the information in just over a month? This kid is a monster. Hu Fei stood up to explain, thanks to everyone organizing the books so neatly, I was able to read so quickly. The young woman beside him was astonished. Even if the materials were well organized, there are still tens of thousands of volumes. Before the maid beside him could speak, Mu Rongyi said to the girl, this is the young master of Heavenly Sword Manor, Hu Fei. The girl hastily cupped her hands in greeting and introduced herself as Mu Rongyun. After everyone exchanged greetings, young Hu Fei instructed Mu Rongyun to show him around the Golden Security Bureau and explain its operations. Hu Fei, quite interested in this experience, began to explore the building. Following her lead, looking at the newly constructed building before him, Hu Fei couldn't help but be surprised. He couldn't imagine it being completed in just over a month. Mu Rongyun explained, the Golden Security Bureau is formed by 9 great families. They jointly protect and build this place. This building is called the Shadow Projection Tower. It's where the Golden Security Bureau researches techniques and martial arts, and it also serves as the meeting place for the Council of Elders. The building opposite is the Alliance Hall, which is the residence of the leaders. Looking over, Hu Fei asked if the building behind was the Moon Peace Hall, the place responsible for pharmaceuticals. Morongyun nodded and said, it's not only a place for healing members, but also for refining pills to enhance the martial artist's power. After a tour, the young woman guiding Hu Fei began to introduce the architecture. Inside the wall are the living quarters of the Jin and Tea leaders, while outside the wall are the servants' quarters. Invited martial artists and grandmasters will also stay here. Looking at these neat rows of houses, this magnificent atmosphere, a sense of pride rose in Hu Fei's heart. As time goes by, the Alliance's power will definitely grow stronger and stronger. At the same time, the internal power struggles will also become increasingly fierce. I hope I can cope with it by then. Not long after, Hu Fei returned to his lodgings and saw everyone preparing for the martial arts conference. The emotions in his heart deepened. Although they had only learned a little martial arts, if combined with the heavenly Tao that he had learned, they would definitely achieve good results in the future. I should train them well. In just 2 years, we can forge a powerful team. She was originally a foolish maid serving the genius young master. Who knew this naive girl had a talent for medicine? By chance, a divine physician took notice of her and wanted to take her on as a disciple. The little maid never dreamed that a few words from the young master would change her life. This story began a year ago during a trip outside. The little maid, whose name was Qing Er, was the young master's personal attendant. After Hu Fei went to participate in the martial arts tournament, she decided to follow him and take care of his daily needs. Today, everyone was training. Hu Fei heard the deputy captain groaning. After inquiring, he learned that the deputy captain had overtrained while preparing for the martial arts tournament. Hu Fei was very dissatisfied with this disregard for his health, and accompanied the deputy captain to Yuan Hall. Soon, the 3 of them arrived at the Wulin League's Yuan Hall. After they identified themselves, the old man at the reception desk led them inside. They saw a white-haired old man sitting cross-legged. The deputy captain explained his condition, and the old man began acupuncture. After observing for a while, the old man's expression softened. He simply said, blocked qi and blood, damaged meridians. He needs rest and recuperation. Then he asked someone to bring acupuncture needles and silver needles. Not long after, the 2 began the treatment. Watching the old man with white hair and thick eyebrows, his movements slow but steady, and seeing the deputy captain sweating from the acupuncture, Hu Fei quickly comforted him, if my internal energy were stronger, your recovery would probably take longer. Just be patient. You should fully recover in about 10 days. Hu Fei quickly told Qinger to make tea for the divine doctor. Soon, the treatment was finished. The old man leisurely picked up the teacup and took a sip. He felt refreshed. He quickly asked the young maid how she brewed the tea. Qinger, caught off guard by the sudden question, stammered, I just used the tools in the tea room. Is there something wrong with the tea? The old man cradled the teacup, murmuring, I can't believe it. The same tea, yet a different flavor. This cup of tea is like the path to immortality. Hu Fei, standing beside him, added, the tea this maid brewed is also very good. The old man smiled and nodded. If she's skilled at brewing tea, then she must also be skilled in medicine. Hearing this, an idea flashed through Hu Fei's mind. A way to allow Qin Ni to stay and learn medicine. Hearing this, the old man chuckled and told Hu Fei that if he truly had this intention, he would naturally be very happy. But I need to test her to see if she has an aptitude for medicine. Having said that, the divine doctor smiled and located his own acupuncture point. Then, he took an acupuncture needle and, without hesitation, inserted it into his acupoint. He then instructed the young maid to follow his previous action and insert the acupuncture needle perpendicularly into the acupoint. He reassured her again not to be nervous, saying he'd practiced medicine for many years and there was no need to worry about the consequences, just to follow his instructions. Hu Fei, sensing a bit of danger, encouraged Qin Ni to try, but the little maid, having never seen such a scene, truly didn't dare to make a move. Left with no other choice, she pretended to proceed. However, her hand was steady as a mountain when she did, using the strength in her fingertips to insert the acupuncture needle perfectly perpendicular into the acupoint. Seeing this, the old man was astonished. Some people are simply born with a natural talent for medicine, their control of force is incredibly precise. Looking at the little maid's technique just now, even he, an old man who had practiced medicine for many years, wasn't sure he could have done it better. Hu Fei listened in surprise as the old man praised her. "You truly possess a remarkable gift." The old man pondered for a moment, as if having made an important decision, then said, "Young master, could you leave this child with me? I'm willing to take her as my disciple and teach her medicine." Hu Fei was stunned, not expecting the old man to say such a thing. This child has a natural aptitude for medicine. I will certainly teach her well. However, Qinger was bewildered. Being a maid, she had never considered this. Hu Fei quickly told her to kowtow. "From now on, this senior is your only master." Being able to help a genius was also his wish, so Hu Fei left Qinger with the divine physician. After arranging everything, Hu Fei went to Jin and Ti. Morong Yi had been waiting for a long time. He then told Hu Fei that, based on the current situation, they could deduce that the Xianin sect had planted spies within the Central Plains martial arts world long ago. Someone has even infiltrated the Wulin Alliance. If I'm not mistaken, some of the Wulin Alliance elders have become spies for the Xianin sect. Hu Fei was stunned speechless by this shocking news. Before he could react, Morong Yi stated that the most important task now was to quickly identify the spies within the Wulin Alliance. The two discussed for a long time, and Hu Fei gradually calmed down. This was truly a difficult problem. Hu Fei walked while pondering solutions, and realized he had arrived near Jianyi Tower. If he wanted to find the spies, he had to set a trap. Moreover, he needed to be familiar with and understand the layout and structure of these buildings. At this moment, he recalled the layout of the Wulin Alliance in his mind. This seemed like a deliberate arrangement. The architecture is exquisite, and the cabinet is centrally located, so in case of emergency, it can easily. However, at this moment, pigeons in the sky interrupted his train of thought, piquing his interest. While familiarizing himself with the surroundings, he hadn't heard Morong Yun mention any dovecot. So these pigeons must be used for communication. He then activated his heavenly eye, observing the surroundings, certain that someone would eventually use the pigeons. Sure enough, a pigeon was released, and Hu Fei quickly locked onto the target, immediately instructing Second Elder Lu to follow the direction of the pigeon's flight. After traveling a short distance, he shot down. The dove fell. The person who released the dove, on the other side, saw their dove get shot down the moment it was released. Panicked, they quickly stood up. Hu Fei looked at the dove in his hand, carefully took out a small roll of paper, opened it, and saw symbols he didn't understand. The other party must have used some sort of encryption. It seems I'll have to investigate this thoroughly. Afterwards, the two stayed there, leaving the dead dove, waiting for the person behind it all to appear. Not long after, the man in black sensed something was wrong. Seeing the empty carrier pigeon, he was startled and realized the letter had been taken. He hurriedly got up and gave chase. At a street corner, he saw Hu Fei and the other two preparing to leave. He thought to himself, this little brat with his triple sword technique is supposedly very naive. Why would he pay attention to our affairs? This 10-year-old Hu Fei's mind is so deep. He shot down the pigeon and intentionally stayed at the scene, then leisurely walked ahead, waiting for someone to follow. But after following for a while, the martial artist realized his identity had been exposed. He then stopped hiding and gave chase, hoping to return to the Alliance and inform them of his exposure. However, he didn't know that everything was part of little Hu Fei's plan. His every move was within Hu Fei's heavenly eyesight. Now it was Hu Fei's turn to track the martial artist, everything was under his control. He then told everyone to follow him, saying he would leave markers along the way. Old Second Lu and the others got up. I thought to myself, this kid's martial arts are strong, and his deductions are excellent. But he completely ignored little Hu Fei behind him. After all, he couldn't believe a 10-year-old child could discover him. So this time, Hu Fei used his heavenly eye to follow. He had mastered many such skills during the previous battle. After walking for a while, the martial artist arrived at a forest. Then he stopped in front of a dilapidated temple. At the same time, there was an old man at the entrance. He hurried to the old man, reported his identity, and said everyone needed to leave quickly. However, these words were overheard by the red-haired demoness at the entrance. Furious enough to make her hair stand on end, she demanded to know what had happened and how such a low-level mistake could have been made. The martial artist hastily knelt and recounted the entire incident to the demoness before him. It was all caused by that little devil from the Heavenly Sword Villa. Listening to the martial artist's account, the demoness understood. She hadn't expected the enemy she'd been searching for so long to be revealed at this moment. She ordered everyone to set out immediately, insisting they kill that little devil, otherwise, the consequences would be dire. But the little devil they spoke of was hiding right under their noses, eavesdropping on their conversation. The martial artist suggested they wait for the moment, lest they expose the profound insect. Hearing this, the red-haired demoness flew into a rage. Her crimson hair, like venomous snakes, coiling around the martial artist. She sternly warned him never to carelessly mention the name of the profound insect again. The martial artist hurriedly wiped his sweat, groveling and apologizing, saying he had misspoken. However, Hu Fei, hiding behind the wall, understood clearly after hearing the words profound insect. Just as he suspected, they were remnants of the demonic sect. What were they planning? Suddenly, he was discovered by the red-haired demoness. Her red hair, like venomous snakes, lashed out towards Hu Fei. In the blink of an eye, Hu Fei sensed danger approaching. But before he could steady himself, the old man beside him leaped up and attacked. The fist, after accumulating power, crackled. Then, like a falling meteor, smashed towards Hu Fei. Looking closely, the move seemed familiar. Hu Fei had no time to think, hastily raising his sword to block. Fortunately, he had been instructed by the Shaolin monks. Otherwise, he would be in danger today. Seeing young Hu Fei block his full attack, the old man was slightly surprised. Continued their attack, but little Hu Fei easily neutralized them. Hu Fei understood he couldn't prolong the fight. The red-haired demoness posed the greatest threat. He retreated, facing the demoness. Recalling the monk's teachings, he focused his eyes on his nose on his heart on his chi, gathering his chi at the crown of his head. As chi converged on his sword, it emitted a brilliant light. The old man was sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood. He shouted, "He's the brat from the Heavenly Sword Manor. He's the one who exposed us." But the red-haired demoness stared intently at the sword on the ground, then looked deeply at Hu Fei, and angrily said, "2 moves to kill our elder, you're quite capable." However, Hu Fei calmly took an object from his chest, quickly pulled the fuse, and then threw it high into the air. It was a Wuling League signal flare. The signal flare flew into the sky and exploded. Hu Fei breathed a sigh of relief. All that remained was to deal with the red-haired demoness. While waiting for second brother Lu and the others to arrive, the red-haired demoness, not being foolish, quickly ordered her subordinates to guard the perimeter. If anyone came to the rescue, they were to be let in, but no one was to escape. She then turned to look at Hu Fei. This little Hu Fei's every movement was stylish, truly pleasing to her. Hu Fei, looking at her seductive smile, felt a little flustered, and said to her, "You're acting too wickedly. Stop trying to charm me." Hearing this, the demoness wasn't angry, but instead said gently, "The more wicked a man is, the more attractive he is." As they spoke, the demoness was intentionally stalling for time, waiting for the others to arrive before making her move. However, second brother Lu and the deputy captain had already arrived. Just as they jumped into the courtyard, waiting for them was a group of Wuling League members wielding swords. Everyone was stunned, thinking the young master had taken care of everything. Seeing that everyone had arrived, the red-haired demoness ordered, "Capture the brat alive, kill the rest." Little Hu Fei bluntly stated he didn't like to talk much. Hearing this, her subordinates became even more enraged, determined to kill him. The red-haired demoness reminded them to capture him alive, and upon hearing this, a martial artist charged towards Hu Fei. He held his sword in both hands as a surge of true chi condensed on the blade. Coupled with the demonic movement techniques of the demonic sect, he became even more ferocious. This was the first time Hu Fei had encountered this kind of opponent, and he found it somewhat difficult to deal with this ghostly movement. With just a moment of carelessness, he was struck. It seemed that fighting head-on wasn't suitable for him. Thinking this, Hu Fei retreated a distance. All of this happened in just a few breaths. Second Elder Lu finally reacted and yelled for the others to protect the young master. However, the men in black wouldn't let them get close. In the blink of an eye, both sides clashed. Knowing this battle was a desperate one, the disciples of the Heavenly Sword Manor fought with their lives on the line. At this moment, if the young master were to meet with misfortune, they too would not return alive. Second Elder Lu warned everyone to fight with all their might. Meanwhile, Hu Fei on the other side had seen through his opponent's intentions. He seized the opening and rushed towards him. Before he could react, Hu Fei struck him in the chest. Coupled with the sharpness of the treasured sword, the martial artist immediately fell to the ground. He thought to himself, "I truly underestimated." Seeing this, the red-haired ghost gnashed her teeth in fury, "Useless fools. You can't even handle a little imp." She then looked at Hu Fei, who now held his sword in both hands, gathering his chi before his chest. This was his unique triple sword technique. The martial artist was slightly stunned by this sight. Although he had heard of this imp's technique,
he was a bit flustered when facing it head-on. While he was still thinking, Hu Fei had already charged towards him. The powerful sword chi and overwhelming aura frightened him, and he could only hastily raise his sword to block. Just like that, the two fought fiercely. The clang of metal rang out from time to time. Hu Fei knew that continuing like this would be disadvantageous for him. So, disregarding the danger, he suppressed his opponent's sword. In the blink of an eye, chi condensed at my fingertips, aimed at their face. Seizing this opportunity, I, Hu Fei, put all my strength into a finishing blow with my sword. Looking again at the red-haired demoness, she looked somewhat incredulous. A teenager had just taken out two of her subordinates in succession. It was time to get serious. Following her surge of rage, her red hair began to thrash wildly. In a flash, she lunged towards me. I managed to dodge, but her speed still startled me. I ducked and rolled to the side. After all, my combat experience is still a bit lacking. His action played right into her hands. The demoness, now enraged, her red hair flailing like venomous snakes, her face contorted in a savage grin, increased the speed of her red hair once more. In a moment of carelessness, it wrapped around Hu Fei's leg. In the blink of an eye, he was tightly bound. Before he could think of a solution, Hu Fei felt himself being dragged away. The red-haired demoness, looking at the little devil she had captured, began to taunt him. But as they say, villains die because they talk too much. While she was gloatingly describing her special technique, Hu Fei opened his celestial eye. The female demon, in her thousand-eye state, now resembled a giant python, slowly being swallowed by the web she herself had spun. Hu Fei now understood. This spiderweb was most afraid of the treasured sword in his hand. Following the principle of a swift blade cuts through chaotic demons, he skillfully channeled his inner energy into the blade, raising his treasured sword high. With Hu Fei's yell, the fierce sword energy instantly tore through the web of hair. The red-haired demoness was once again startled by Hu Fei's power. I've roamed the martial world for decades, and aside from the Northern Heavenly Steed sect leader, whom I admire, no one has ever been able to break my martial arts. Thinking this, the red-haired demoness leaped into the air, charging towards Hu Fei. However, she didn't know that even the simplest technique, through prolonged practice, could unleash immense power. While she was mocking Hu Fei's clumsy technique, in the blink of an eye, vital energy condensed on his fingertips, striking the red-haired demoness' spiritual weapon. Following the red-haired demoness' scream, her body gradually fell. She knew she had lost to this teenager. The powerful sword energy not only severed her treasured sword, but even her poison-tempered body couldn't withstand it. The red-haired demoness struggled unwillingly, unable to believe she would die like this. Hu Fei, seemingly seeing through her thoughts, said, "They all said I have a natural talent for swordsmanship, a once-in-a-century genius. If I told you I have the same physique as your sect leader, would you still feel wronged?" Hearing this, the red-haired demoness gnashed her teeth in anger. The sect leader was a supreme existence in her heart. This little bastard dared to make such a casual comparison. However, at this moment, her wounds suddenly flared up. Following the red-haired demoness' scream of agony, the battle came to an end. The onlookers were horrified. Their leader had been killed just like that, they were surely doomed as well. But before they could react, Second Elder Lu led the others in a charge. The young master has taken care of the leader. Kill the rest of these minions. In the blink of an eye, they were wiped out. Watching the scene before him, a wave of emotion washed over Hu Fei. He felt a sense of pride. They had just entered the Jianghu, yet they were already capable of fighting independently. In just a few months, their strength had greatly increased. The training had been truly effective. At that moment, Second Elder Lu came to ask young master Hu Fei how to deal with the bodies. Hu Fei thought for a moment, then told everyone to pile the bodies together and burn them. After taking care of that, under Hu Fei's leadership, they settled everything there. Then they hurried back to report. Judging from today's events, the demonic cult, led by the Xianin sect, had begun to move. They needed to report back to the Wulin Alliance quickly. After hearing Hu Fei's recounting, the Wulin Alliance's higher-ups were utterly astonished. They never expected the demonic cult to be hiding right under their noses. They admired the young master of the Heavenly Sword Manor even more, impressed that he had uncovered this at such a young age. At this moment, inside Morongye's room, Hu Fei was discussing the next plan with him. According to Hu Fei's story, Monk Yunjin had told him years ago that he had been targeted by the demonic cult's Angel of Death. From this, it was clear the enemy was one step ahead of them. I must thoroughly investigate the specific situation. As he pondered, a voice interrupted his thoughts. The newcomer was Morong Yun. She was still somewhat worried about Hu Fei having single-handedly taken on the demonic cult group. Anyway, this will draw attention to him. Hu Fei said it was part of the plan, not to worry. While they were discussing this, 3 more people approached. They had long admired the beautiful Morong Yun, but they didn't recognize the child beside her. They were thinking of how to approach them.
When young Hu Fei stepped forward and blocked their way. Introducing himself as Zhao, he said he was acting on the Elder Council's instructions and hoped to collaborate with them in their discussions. Upon hearing this, Morongyun praised him, saying young people should be proactive. However, this played right into their hands. They exchanged glances. And one of them said, "I know a tea house with a pleasant atmosphere. We could discuss things over tea." Hu Fei saw all of this. With his heavenly eye, he could see right through their intentions. He was more concerned with the power of their families, thinking to himself that he still didn't know how many bad things those families had done. They might even be connected to the demonic cult. That Zhao then took Morongyun's hand, and solicitously offered to take her for tea. But Hu Fei interrupted. At this moment, Hu Fei secretly told Morongyun to play along with him. Then he asked Morongyun, "Meeting these friends is quite a fortunate coincidence. Shall we go to a tavern to chat?" The three young men were secretly delighted to hear the change from a tea house to a tavern. Hu Fei said, "There's a restaurant here. It's a bit out of the way, but the food is excellent." Zhao was overjoyed at this and quickly said that he must drink his fill today. Meanwhile, Hu Fei's plan was put into motion. This young woman was the beauty of the Wuling Alliance. Now, she was being tricked into drinking at a tavern by these dandies. However, 10-year-old Hu Fei saw through all of this. Just as he suspected, these people were all in cahoots. Led by Hu Fei, they gradually entered the forest. The young man in the lead, Zhao, only then reacted. How could the demonic cult have a tavern? He hastily asked Hu Fei where they were going, his heart filled with anxiety. Seeing they were deep in the forest, Hu Fei dropped his pretense. "Isn't this secluded place exactly where you wanted to go?" Startled, the others looked around, realizing they'd been tricked by Hu Fei. Enraged, Zhao threatened to skin him alive. But Hu Fei exposed their plot, warning them that no matter how high their standing in the Wuling Alliance, he would expose them. Zhao, now furious, swore to teach Hu Fei a lesson. He charged forward after speaking, but Hu Fei easily neutralized the punch. Zhao was now a little suspicious of Hu Fei's movements, but there was no way back now. So he launched his attack, after images filling the sky like falling meteors. Fierce gusts of fist force, like exploding gunpowder, surrounded Hu Fei. Although it was orthodox fist technique, it lacked that strange quality. Zhao was getting impatient now. Feeling humiliated by his opponent, he was enraged to the extreme. Suddenly, his chi erupted, unleashing his family's secret technique, countless fists bombarding Hu Fei from all directions. Faced with this situation, Hu Fei, as if he had foreseen it long ago, finally drew his sword. He dodged the fatal blow, spun around, and advanced behind his opponent, transforming his fist into a palm strike, hitting him in the middle of the back. Facing this attack, Zhao cried out in fear. Hu Fei finally understood, as long as his opponent showed a weakness, he could strike. He suddenly leaped up and kicked his opponent. Zhao was kicked back 5 or 6 meters before stopping. The two bodyguards standing nearby also felt uneasy. However, their martial arts skills were only on par with Zhao. By the time they reacted, Hu Fei was like an avalanche. My hands, combined with the power of the heavenly Tao, easily broke their swords. Then, with a crack, the two of them fell to the ground like chopped radishes. Morongyun knew Hu Fei liked to read, but she didn't expect his martial arts to be so powerful. Just now, she saw his swordsmanship change like 6 different palm styles. Could it be the legendary 6 harmony palms? While she was pondering, the two guards had already collapsed. Seeing Zhao trying to get up, Hu Fei showed no mercy. He channeled his inner energy, gathering it at his fingertips. In the blink of an eye, he struck at Zhao, who hadn't yet gotten to his feet. Another palm strike landed on him. At this moment, he still showed no intention of stopping, continuing the flurry of blows. Zhao began to wonder if he had misjudged him. After a few breaths, Zhao was beaten black and blue. His previous arrogance was nowhere to be seen. This little bastard is truly a monster. Even Morongyun was frightened out of his wits. The other two were terrified by Hu Fei's aura. Seeing Zhao's fate, they hurriedly knelt down and begged, swearing they would do anything for him. Hu Fei knew the purpose of this trip, and revealed his and Morongyun's true identities. Morongyun was the head of the Elder Council, and he was the Director General of the Intelligence Bureau. Upon hearing their identities, the two were even more terrified. Not to mention the families backing them, the position of Director General alone could bring their families trouble. Hu Fei asked them if they still wanted to live. The two of them, as if granted a great pardon, pledged their utmost efforts. I then asked them to hand over their family tokens for easier access later, but the tokens alone weren't enough. Clever Hu Fei quickly devised another method for them. Starting tomorrow, I will post the information I require to the right of the inner city entrance. If you disobey or deceive me, your families will also be implicated. The two, aware of the gravity of this, hastily agreed. After giving these instructions, Hu Fei let them go. Morong Yun witnessed all of this. Although she didn't understand the reason. She had seen young Hu Fei's resourcefulness and asked him what he planned to do next. She heard him mutter, "They're all in this together. I'll make them pay for what they've done." Hu Fei's innocent face startled her. Scheming little Hu Fei is really suited to intelligence work. End of Season 1. Please join us for the next videos.